Good afternoon. Welcome back to another session on my declassified Caribbean channel. Thank you so much for joining. Now, for years, one of the loudest voices condemning the United States and what Venezuelan officials call the empire has been Delcy Rodriguez. Whether speaking at the United Nations, regional summits, or press conferences in Caracas, Rodriguez has consistently accused Washington of economic aggression, imperialism, and attempts to overthrow the Venezuelan government. According to that narrative, Venezuela's economic troubles were not primarily the result of internal policies, but of American sanctions and interference. But today, something interesting is happening. Venezuela is actively seeking foreign investment. It is reforming its hydrocarbons legislation. It is encouraging greater private sector participation. It is promoting partnerships with foreign companies. And according to recent statements from business leaders, much of the Venezuela's oil is now being marketed through American companies and international firms operating within a more transparent framework, according to what they're telling us, right? We don't have to believe what they're saying, but this is what they are telling us. At the same time, Venezuela is seeking deeper energy cooperation with Trinidad and Tobago through projects such as the Dragon gas field. This raises an uncomfortable question. Was all the anti-American rhetoric genuine conviction, or was it political theater? Think about it. If the United States was the principal obstacle to Venezuela's prosperity, why is Venezuela now pursuing arrangements that depend on international investors, multinational corporations, and in some cases, American commercial participation? Why are sectors once considered strategic pillars of national sovereignty now being open to private investment? Why are policies once condemned as neoliberal becoming increasingly attractive? Supporters of the Venezuelan government will argue that there is no contradiction. They will say that Venezuela never opposed trade, it opposed domination. They will argue that the sanctions forced the country to adapt and that attracting foreign investment is simply a practical response to economic realities. In this interpretation, Caracas is not abandoning its principles, but using global capital on its own terms. There is some logic to that argument. After all, governments across the political spectrum often work with countries they publicly criticize. China and the United States compete fiercely, yet remain major trading partners. Russia sells energy to countries that oppose it politically. Geopolitics is full of contradictions, but critics see something different. They argue that Venezuela spent years demonizing the very economic mechanisms it is now embracing. For decades, state control was presented as the solution. Foreign corporations were portrayed as exploiters. Market reforms were treated with suspicion. Yet today, Venezuela appears increasingly interested in foreign capital, private management, and international partnerships. If that isn't true, or if that is true, then perhaps the debate is not whether Washington was right about Maduro. Was Washington really right? Perhaps the deeper question is whether economic reality eventually forced Venezuela to acknowledge that it needed some of the very things it once rejected. But before anyone declares victory, we should be careful. The United States was not entirely right. Many American policymakers predicted that sanctions would quickly collapse the Venezuelan economy or the Venezuelan government. That never happened. They actually went there and they took Maduro out by force. Many predicted political change would come rapidly. It did not. Many overlooked the suffering sanctions imposed on ordinary Venezuelans. At the same time, Venezuelan leaders cannot easily claim complete vindication either. If the existing model was working, why the need for major reforms? Why the push for foreign investment? Why the growing role of private enterprise? These are fair questions. Perhaps what we are witnessing is neither a triumph for Washington nor a vindication for Caracas. perhaps it is something far more common in international politics, ideological posturing colliding with economic necessity. Governments often speak in absolutes, but govern in compromises. So they speak in absolutes, but they govern in compromises. Leaders denounce foreign powers while negotiating with them behind closed doors. And that is the essence of geopolitics, the hypocrisy behind geopolitics, the inconsistencies behind geopolitics. Political narratives are often designed for domestic audience. Let me repeat that. Political narratives are often designed for domestic audience or audiences, while economic realities force policymakers to behave more pragmatically. So as Trinidad and Tobago explores deeper cooperation with Venezuela, we should look beyond the slogans. The real question is not whether Delcy Rodriguez once criticized the United States. The real question is whether Venezuela's current reforms represent a temporary adjustment or a fundamental transformation of the country's economic model. And if Venezuela is indeed moving toward greater private investment and international cooperation, what does that tell us about the limits of ideology when confronted with economic reality? Let me know what you think in the comments. Is Venezuela undergoing a genuine transformation? Was Washington right all along? Or is this simply another example of hypocrisy and pragmatism that have always defined geopolitics? Please let me know in the comments. Now, I say that to say because I saw this in the Trinidad and Tobago's Express this morning. Venezuela eyes stronger TNT ties. So I wasn't planning to come here this afternoon, but I thought that I would share this with you because the news is really moving at a rapid pace, and sometimes I just have to do these, emergency lives, if you will. Now, it says here, Venezuela is positioning itself as one of the region's most significant investment opportunities, with sweeping reforms in its energy sector, expanding oil production, and growing prospects for cross-border collaboration with Trinidad and Tobago. Speaking at the American Chamber of Commerce, Trinidad and Tobago's 33rd annual general meeting and business forum at the Hilton Trinidad on Friday, President of the Venezuelan American Chamber of Commerce, Amaru Liendo, said the South American nation is undergoing a major economic transformation that is creating opportunities across energy, infrastructure, logistics, healthcare, and and other sectors. We have the biggest oil reserves in the world, he's saying, and I would say that we also have a lot of gas that is not yet fully certified. There is a opportunity for investment. I'm having a little bit of problems here on my screen as I'm reading interested to see if I can read more of the article here. We have the biggest oil reserve, he says, in the world, and I would say that we also have a lot of gas that is not yet fully certified. There is a big opportunity to continue to explore, he said. He told the audience that Venezuela's oil industry is recovering after years of decline, with production rising from approximately 1 million barrels per day at the start of the year to between 1.2 million and 1.3 million barrels daily. According to Liendo, forecasts suggest production could reach at least 1.5 million barrels per day next year. But look at what he's saying here. This is a huge amount of money. This is a huge amount of opportunity. Without major investment, Venezuela could rise to 1.5 to 1.8 million barrels per day. With additional investment, we can easily reach again around 3 billion barrels per day of production because we have done it before, he said. Liendo said reforms to Venezuela's hydrocarbons legislation have improved the country's competitiveness and are helping attract international investors. We passed from being the least competitive country in the world's borders to being in the middle of the ranking with that law, he said. He also highlighted efforts to improve transparency in the country's energy and mining sectors. Fortunately, we now have this is what he's saying, a transparent market for our oil, and all the oil is being traded by American ethical, honest, and transparent companies that are paying the full market price to my country, he said. Leandro said Venezuela's vast mineral resources are also attracting growing interest from international companies as authorities move to formalize and regulate mining operations. Now, what do you think? When we look at the fact that Venezuela was the country that was suggesting that, wow, under Rodriguez as a vice president, that the United States was the most, imperialistic country. Now we're seeing that it almost appears like the government of Delcy Rodriguez has been captured by U.S. multinational corporations and their oligarchs. Now, it's very, very interesting as we see things unfold, because as I said before, geopolitics is all about making deals, as Trump is suggesting here. It doesn't have anything to do with standing up for the rights, okay, and being also noble and having some amount of integrity, is it? No, that's not what they are about. They are about doing things behind the scenes that will cause many of us to wonder, what really are they doing? And do we really understand what is happening in this geopolitical world? But look at this article I found here also, ladies and gentlemen, on the left operation. This is called the Venezuelan Voices, right? And it's a left-wing newspaper article, whatever you want to call it. And they call it by VenezuelanVoices.org. And it says here, and this was published on January 28, 2026, after the capture and kidnapping of Nicolas Maduro. On Wednesday, January 28th, a group of left opposition organizations protested in Morelos Square in Caracas and presented a letter to the Ombudsman office rejecting U.S. military aggression and the Venezuelan government's collaboration with Trump and the Venezuelan government's collaboration with Trump, as well as demanding democratic rights. This is the text of the letter delivered to the Ombudsman's office. And it says here, we, a group of political organizations and social and union activists who identify as anti-imperialists, from the National Meeting in Defense of the Rights of the People and other leftist movements, request your attention as ombudsman, as we believe that the genuine interests of the nation, and more specifically our fate as Venezuelan people, are at enormous risk in the face of the crisis we're currently experiencing and confronting. As we are well aware, our country was attacked in the early hours of January 3rd, 2026 by U.S. military forces, resulting in the bombing of several civilian and military installations, as well as an officially unspecified number of deaths. But according to unofficial information, exceed 100 killings and the kidnapping of Nicolas Maduro and Celia Flores, who were transferred to a maximum security prison in New York. We hereby make it clear that we categorically reject the imperialist military aggression of the United States against Venezuela and all the geopolitical interests expressed by the imperialist power currently led by Donald J. Trump, murderer and enemy of the peoples of the world, as well as the kidnapping that has been perpetrated. Donald Trump makes no secret of his expansionist and colonialist ambitions. He sees himself subjugating all of Latin America and the Caribbean and has his sights set on Canada and Greenland. We therefore consider that what has just happened in our country is merely one step in a broader strategy of subjugation by the U.S. imperialist power against the rest of the continent. In view of this, it is urgent that all peoples of the region, including the American people themselves, begin to organize ourselves to respond appropriately to these events and to be able to stop these attempts at colonialist domination marked by barbarism. We take a critical view of how the national government, then headed by Nicolas Maduro, responded from the very moment Trump began to deploy his forces in the Caribbean, without any preparation or real policy designed to motivate the majority of the people to defend our sovereignty and our territory. We take the same critical stance Listen to what they're saying here. We take the same critical stance on how the Venezuelan government is acting now after the bombing and with Delcy Rodriguez as acting president, showing complete collaboration with the US, while Trump openly states that they now decide how Venezuela and its wealth are managed, with oil exploitation as the focal point. An example of this is the current reform of the hydrocarbons law, which opens the door to the privatization of the country's main energy resource, oil, for the benefit of large transnational corporations as well as the US government itself. This is a condition of tutelage that we cannot accept as Venezuelans or as anti-imperialists. In this sense, we must begin by restoring a comprehensive democratic framework so all voices opposed to Yankee interference and the collaboration of the current government can express themselves freely and have the opportunity to widely publicize our proposals in this regard. So we're seeing here where they're telling us that the government of Venezuela was indeed involved in the whole shenanigan, right? The capture of Maduro himself. Now, how could that be? A left-wing government, right, in which Delcy Rodriguez was at the helm along with Maduro, and she was behaving. We knew all of the sort of going back and forth with Miss Kamala Person-Becesar, all of what she said, and she said that Kamala Person-Becesar was on the side of the imperialists, and she was siding with the people. Now we have her government, because she's now the acting president of Venezuela, giving the United States everything that it desires. What the contradictions, right? What hypocrisy. And many of us need to follow this and understand that the geopolitical world in which we live is not a world in which it is honest, it is fair, right? It is noble. It is not, right? What they do, they enter into deals, right? And these deals are not necessarily for you and for me. These are for private corporations. And the same thing Trump is now doing with Iran. Okay, they are making deals. And at the end of the day, you are going to see that these deals have nothing to do with our freedom or the freedoms of ordinary people, right? It has to do with enriching and empowering these oligarchs, these so-called elites. So I wanted to come here and ask you, what do you think about this sort of development in the news? Good evening, and yes. Oh, you're a bit occupied. Yes. Okay, good. Thank you. And this is just an urgent. So you guys, I was just wanting to come and see what to see how you'd react to this sort of news, because I thought it was something very interesting in the world of geopolitics. The fact that we're seeing now the United States completely taking over Venezuela, and there is no sort of protest in terms of what is happening. How will this benefit Trinidad and Tobago? This is what we would like to know. It sounds good from a surface level, thinking. Yeah, it sounds good because it sounds like, as we're saying, Venezuela can go back to producing billions of barrels of oil per day. But how will those profits help the ordinary man and the economy to grow and to develop? Because we know, we've seen the script before, that the United States does not, after it takes a country, is not interested in the development of that particular country. It's more interested in arresting, expropriating the resources and the monies that belong to the people. So I just wanted to hear from you and to see what you would have said in this sort of news story development. What do you think? Do you think that this is a wise move from Delcy Rodriguez? Do you think she's just playing the game, as some people are suggesting, and that very soon she will stand up and let them know where they need to go? What do you think? Please let me know what you think, because this is something I thought was quite interesting and a news story. Let me hear from you. So we're looking at Venezuela's oil U-turn and oil and gas U-turn. TNT partnership raises big questions. That's the title of our afternoon's program for today. So let me know what you think about this interesting sort of news story. We have 7 people here on the live. You can share the live, like it so that others can join. The more you like it, the more others, or let me know what's on your mind while other people are joining. We might not spend more than an hour here this afternoon, this afternoon. So let me know what you're about and what you're thinking, what's on your mind. Yes, Afro Grenada is saying, yes, welcome to the live. I think Delcy is not to be trusted. Yeah, neither do I. I don't think she is a person of integrity. As we read before, and I've presented that video, that she is on record that she was already from last year in collaboration with people from Qatar and who were representing Trump, or they would take back her message to Trump. So it was just this sort of betrayal that I don't know how Maduro sits in prison now and what he thinks of her and the sort of betrayal that happened on the 3rd of June, but January this year, 2026. Something that is amazing. And it tells us that, human beings, whatever color they may be, whether they're brown or they're white or they're black, okay, that is not what you're going to use as a sort of standard to suggest whether they can be trusted or not. Right, your own brother, sister, countryman or countrywoman can betray you if it's going to, redound in their interest. So that's what we have to understand. Please share the live, ladies and gentlemen. Like the live, share it with others so that others can come on the platform and we can have an intelligent discussion on this very important developing story. Because whatever this is affecting, as they're suggesting in the letter here. Did you hear what the left-wing people said? They are saying that this is just the beginning of how Trump is going to go to other countries and to pillage and to plunder. So Venezuela is just the starting point of US's imperialistic endeavors to capture the resources of developing countries and any country that they deem they need to do it. They talked about Greenland, right? And now we're hearing about Cuba and other countries, Iran, right? All of these countries. But what is interesting is that we have been discussing is that while we're seeing these developments, there seem to be 2 sides of all of this, and maybe there are more sides too. Maybe it's more layered than we were thinking, but certainly what we are seeing is not necessarily what is really happening. Behind the scenes, there are other, what you call it now, negotiations going on, agreements that we aren't aware of, and some of those agreements might be agreements that will impinge on our civil liberties and violate, right, our constitutional rights. So we have to follow these stories, and we cannot take them literally what they tell us. We have to delve deeper and say, what does this mean for us and the wider world, right? And that is what we're here for on this platform. Any of your, yes, so that is, I don't trust Delcy Rodriguez. I think that she is a snake. And that is so sad. But she's not the only one. Many of our leaders or government officials are also snakes. And they tell us one thing, and behind the scenes, as we suggest, they are completely doing something else. And we were talking about AI yesterday, and somebody was saying that the government of the Caribbean, some of them are trying to regulate the use of AI. But could it be that they're trying also, when they tell us that they're regulating it, that they're actually taking away our rights? We also have to be very skeptical when they tell us that they're doing things that sound lovely, but at the same time, they're doing the complete opposite. Welcome, Fangzi. Yeah, we would like to hear what you think about it. I find it interesting. I find it interesting that you are able to critical think when it comes to contemporary geopolitics, yet gravitate towards apologetic dogma when it comes onto the historical context of Septuagint. Yeah, but that is your opinion, right? That is your opinion, and that's okay. I could say the same thing about you. Right, that is your opinion in terms of my thinking critical. The fact of the matter is that the Jews said that Christ wasn't thinking critically too. Right, and he was all-knowing. So yeah, that is your opinion in terms of the Septuagint versus the King James Version and what you think is. So let's not go there today, right? Let's try to agree on the important issues, whether it's a Septuagint or you think another version of the Bible is the correct. Let's not be able now to create divisions, because that is what they want us to do. to create divisions. Oh, should you read the King James Version or should you read the New International Version? We are not here going to debate those topics, because at the end of the day, what we want to get and to be able to appreciate is the truth, right? Not to suggest who is, reading what version of what Bible or what historical text. Okay, that is what we need to understand. What do you think, Fangzi? I thought you were talking about what do you think, given your critical understanding and awareness of geopolitics, what do you think about the developments that we're here talking about? What do you think about Delcy Rodriguez? Do you think that she somehow might have what you call it now, betrayed her former colleague and president? But you were using theological talking points from your denomination. That is what I meant. I was teasing you. One of the things that you have to understand, we are individuals. We are what you call it now. We are individuals, and we have to be a part of organizations, right? We can't be all over the place. One of the things that we need to understand, one of the things I see about on our YouTube geopolitical channels is that they're all over the place, right? You have to be able to look at the noise and take a stand. Yes, I'm Seventh-day Adventist, and because I have explored, I used to go to many churches, and then I did my own study, and I was convinced that the Seventh-day Adventist Church had the truth. So it's not because I have not looked at other religions and other denominations, but in the final analysis, you have to take a stand. Where do you stand? Where do you want to be? What do you think is truth? If having done that, then that is your conscience, right? And you can't beat somebody for being whatever they think they are. Now, the point is that here on this channel, I try to have people, to give their different perspectives. So, Fangzi, you might not agree with me, but I still, highlight your comment and we ask questions. That is what's about. It doesn't mean, therefore, that you might be right, or perhaps maybe I'm not right too. But the fact of the matter is that we need to highlight our different opinions, because that is what we're not getting in the world right now. Okay, and then you will make your decision in terms of where you want to stand. Okay, but I have decided to make my decision in terms of my religiosity and my religious group that I am affiliated with. Right, it has nothing to do with anything. It's saying here, let me go to her. It's good she's showing her face. Right, it is good. Yeah, it is good now that she's actually showing her face. But when they went down there from Maduro, right, that I found it strange that they did not know where she was, right? She just disappeared, right? She just disappeared, and then eventually, I think it was the following day after he had been captured, that they said that she was on an island off the coast of Venezuela, something of the sort. And then Trump said, "Oh, I want Delcy to be president." And I found that strange, because she was one of the most vociferous, apart from Maduro, obviously she was the vice president, she was one of the most vociferous persons who spoke against the American imperialism. And she took Miss Kamala Persis, Bissessar of Trinidad and Tobago, on and told her that she was on the side of Trump and that she was an imperialist and she was a slave, and all the language that she used, right? But now we find that she is actually doing the bidding of the United States, the same country that she was opposing. And I'm not saying here that I agree with her, all right? I'm just giving you what the news is giving. Yeah, I did not trust Delcy. Also, Stephen, welcome, Stephen. Delcy, also, you see the harm she has done to Cuba, right? Right? Because after that, Cuba was just, the fact of the matter is that after the country was taken over, she could not do anything in terms. If she was going to accept the position, she would have to, sever the relationship between Cuba and Venezuela. So I think the principal thing that she would have done was to step down. If I had that conviction that the United States was this imperialist country and they were going to take over the country, which they are doing, I could not lead the country. Some people are suggesting that she could lead it and then try to, do her part to steer back the country on the path of Maduro's socialist policies. That cannot be done. Right? Because the CIA is down there too, and the CIA is in every aspect of her business. So that cannot be done. Right? The best way she could show her loyalty to Maduro was to have resigned. right? And probably left the country or whatever she wants to do with her life. But to suggest that she's going to stay there and do what the United States is asking her to do, which she's doing, is totally a slap in the face of President Maduro and his wife. Yes, yeah, if there was harm done to Cuba, it was led by Trump. Yes, right. Yeah, but what we're saying here is that, if you are the one at the helm of Venezuela. Venezuela was friend of Cuba, right? And we know that Venezuela provided lots of help and support for Cuba. The fact that she's there and this sort of friendship cannot be continued, I think that I would have to remove myself, because she is aware that without Cuba too, Cuba provided some sort of support to Venezuela also. Remember now that how many soldiers died? The Cuban soldiers that died during the kidnapping of Maduro. So the Cubans have been very loyal to the Venezuelans too. They have been great friends to them. Now, Francis, I respect you and you think you have a sharp mind. To your question, my perception is that Maduro and Rodriguez are both in on the flip-flop. I think so too. I think so too. I think many of my viewers are saying that that's not true, but I think that they're on the flip-flop. Rodriguez's family has a history with the Chavista revolution. Yes, it does. The entire operation seemed to have been phony, but at the same time, I am not, I can't, I don't have the evidence. I can't say 100%, as you're saying, Fungs, that, both are on it. But the whole thing just seems very strange and bizarre. So I'm just watching and looking as time progresses. Was a left-wing guerrilla fighter and political organizer. Yes, she was, and who co-founded the Marxist-Leninist Socialist League in the 1970s. Right. So what we would have said is that the fact that she is of the same political, ilk, that she would have stood up. She did make some statements, give her credit, that, the United States should release him because he's innocent and all of that and stuff like that. But the fact is that those were just rhetoric, because we know that the United States is not going to let him go just like that. Okay? Her father was. Yes, her father was. And then we have here, he was arrested in 1976 and died in custody at age 34, which might play a part on her chat or her dance with reality. But she was aware of that. She was aware of the fact that her father was killed. The media was carrying those reports from the time that was leading up to the kidnapping of Nicolas Maduro. So she was aware of that. I just think that she has always wanted to be president, right? And that she perhaps thinks that, Nicolas Maduro might have been there for some time now. And, the politics is a very cutthroat profession. And I want you to understand that, many of these people who say that they have your back, they don't generally have your back. It's a very nasty profession, right? And you have to have strong wits, right? And a strong heart to be able to stand up to the powers that be, and even to betrayals from your friends and your colleagues, right? That is the nature of the political world. There is a powerful juju. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So this is something that now, how do you think this is going to help Trinidad? Because you're suggesting here that the Ms. Carmen Processor is going to be working with Venezuela to develop their oil and gas fields. Do you think that this is going to be of great benefit to Trinidad? What is happening in Trinidad right now? Because I'm hearing many things happening. We have the closure of banks like the CIBC. We are hearing reports coming out of Trinidad and Tobago about the fact that many Trinidadians, up to how many percent they said? Is it 32%, are living, are not being able to afford a nutritious diet, right? So these are things that are happening there. And I'm sure that these things are happening in other parts of the Caribbean region too, right? So what do you think this is going to be for Trinidad? What, benefits do you think this is going to bring to Trinidad and Tobago? This sort of deal. I want to hear from you. Because this is a very interesting story. And what it's telling us is that we can trust no man, right? We can trust no man or no woman, all right? That you cannot put your trust in men, because men, especially when you are at a certain level of power, people will betray. People will betray common trust. And what we're seeing happening in the geopolitical realm, another story, what you see is not what you get, right? And some people are saying, oh, but this is what NATO is the enemy of. Yeah, well, okay, if you look closely at geopolitics, you will see that it's multi-layered, right? And we have to look at many different, sort of sides to see where we stand. If not, we are going to be in problem. Uh, Steve Nat is asking, what black country, why is this thing coming up here, Lord? Yeah, what black country has prospered from oil exploration? Look at the living conditions in Guyana, right? In Trinidad, tell me how have they prospered from the oil? And I'm talking about the country as a whole. I mean, they used to prosper from the oil. I think that after the I would say from 2004 to maybe 2000. What would you say, Trinidadians? 2015, 16. I think that Trinidad was having an oil boom, and they really were benefiting, and they were really growing. In fact, many Trinidadians in the United States, I remember, wanted to go back home, and they said that it's better in Trinidad and Tobago. They had now given their students free education up to university level. Okay, many people in the Caribbean were suggesting. I remember I had a friend from Jamaica who lived in Guyana at the time, but she would go over to Trinidad, and she told me that that's the country that was becoming almost like on the verge of becoming a first world country. That was Trinidad and Tobago, and that could have been like in 2007. So there was a time when the oil was booming in Trinidad and things were really going well for them. I don't know how things just finally turning left. Trinidad has complicated relationship with Venezuela, etc. Example, the Dragon gas deal. Well, wasn't that because of the rift between Trump and Venezuela and the United States that created that rift? Did they have that rift? Did they have a rift before? Was that rift something that they had before the conflict that existed between the United States and Venezuela? Can somebody say from Trinidad, if anybody's in the chat from Trinidad, and if there was a rift or a conflict before Trump had that sort of conflict with Venezuela? Was there a conflict before? Please make sure you're sharing the live so that others can join. The algorithm is not interested in sharing the live, so you depend on you to share the live with as many people on the platform. But I do know that Trinidad and Tobago were prospering and had the oil boom, and they benefited quite some time. But I can see what you're saying, because Nigeria is a point that we are seeing where Nigeria also has oil and gas, and they also, as a whole, their country could have been richer and more developed, but it's just for a few, all right? It's not for the large majority of Nigerians. Outside forces cause that rule, right? Absolutely. That is what that caused that, division between the Trinidadians and the Venezuelans. But before, the outside rift, right? There was, yes, the conflict, right? The conflict between the United States and Venezuela that created that rift between Trinidad and Venezuela. Before, I don't think they might have had. I'm sure in all business and we're neighbors are going to have some, some tit for tat sometimes. But I've never read of any severe problems between Trinidad and Tobago and Venezuela prior to the buildup of the Maduro capture. Well, the Dragon gas field was historically completely owned by the people of Venezuela, but not sure if the status in flux now or not. Yes, you're correct. You're correct. What is happening is that because of the rift, whether it was true or it was, just an act, or we don't know if it was they were just acting, because how much of, let me ask you this fundamental question. How much of what we're seeing in the geopolitical world, how much of it is acting? How much of it is real? Have you ever asked yourself that question? I think these are some of the questions now we need to really ask ourselves. Are they just like Shakespeare say? Are they acting? They're just mere actors on the stage, on the geopolitical stage, where they are actually distracting us, and we are not trying to come together as a people so that we can oppose their sort of nefarious agenda. This is what we have to ask ourselves. But I think there's some degree of acting, right? Something that are staged, right? Like we're watching the politicians are on a stage and they're actually performing right before our eyes. I think US in 2025 had revoked the OFAC license granted to Trinidad and Tobago. They did. And that was what created this sort of the hullabaloo between Trinidad and Venezuela and Caracas, right? The people from Caracas, that's Delcy Rodriguez, who was then the vice president. She was saying that it should not have been done, and she was calling Miss Kama Person Besessor, like somebody who is pliable, and that she was, agreeing with Trump's imperialist agenda. But at the same time, what we're seeing now, Miss Delcy Rodriguez is doing the same thing, right? She's doing the same thing that she was complaining against or about Miss Person Besessor. Yes, the Dragon Field is located in Venezuelan waters near the maritime border with Trinidad. Yes. But what do you think? What do you think is going to come out of this now? Do you think that as Caribbean people, we're going to wake up to see that our leaders are not working in the interest of the common man, that they're working in the interest of global capital, and that all they want is to profit from what the proceeds of monies that come from that global capital fund? What do you think? Do you think we're waking up to that, or do you think we're still fast asleep? Rubio was driving the talks before the current conflict. He was. Rubio is involved in everything, right? Is there anything that he's not involved in? He is. And I think that he's going to run for the president or vice president of the United States. I think that his ticket is sure because he has done a whole lot and accomplished a whole lot in a very relatively short time. And if Cuba is taken, you know that Marco Rubio, is going to be one of a top candidate for the presidency or vice presidency of the United States. That's for sure. CARICOM will have to act as a proxy similar to ECOWAS has to play ball or else. Well, the CARICOM is weak now, and CARICOM is entirely sold over and captured to U.S. interests, right? So there's no way that CARICOM at this point in time is going to intervene in what is happening. They will make statements. That's what they do. That's what they're known for. And about, that there ought to be, we want to have a zone of peace and all of the things that they normally say. But at the end of the day, they're not going to stand up to the U.S. and to U.S. imperialism. We have seen that with Cuba. We've seen that with Venezuela. And we've seen that with many things that are happening now in the Caribbean. So that is what we have to understand. We are the ones, I'm saying to you, we are the ones who have to now take the right decisions, make the right decisions, and speak out, maybe so we can push the arms of our governments. If we are more educated, more informed, and we can push our government, put pressure on them to do what is right, perhaps. But I don't think Caribbean people are yet that mature to do that. I think we are too divided, and I think that we divide ourselves among very petty stuff, and we have to now move away from our differences and now begin, because we won't agree on everything. Even in churches or scientific community or in academia, nobody agrees on everything, right? Your family that you live with don't agree on all points. So we must understand that we are different individuals, but what we want to do, our common values, that of freedom, right? And to know what is right and what is wrong in terms of in politics and what we are seeing in the political realm, we need to stand up right now. And if we do that, that's the only way CARICOM and the other organizations will be forced to work on our behalf and not on behalf of the reigning elites, right? But this is something that is a rather important topic. And I think that it is going to be the defining moment for the Caribbean in terms of U.S. wanting to come and exploit our resources, expropriate our land and our assets, and then move on. Okay, now listen to what the article was saying here. We are burning gas every single day that could power the whole TNT territory. Liendo said, that is the guy from Venezuela. If we recover that gas, we could cover all the necessities of TNT. A major challenge facing Venezuela remains its electricity system, which Liendo described as being a state of collapse after years of underinvestment. We have power outages of 6 to 8 hours per day in almost every part of the country except Caracas. He said reforms are now allowing private sector participation in the electricity industry for the first time. So we are seeing now the private sector taking over even the electrical company of Venezuela. The government authorized the participation of the private sector in the electricity sector. This is something that never happened. This is something that never happened in the past, he said. If we're able to change the approach of managing the electricity sector from a private standpoint, we are going to get better results. So what he's saying, that everything has to be privatized. So we're living now in what we call a technocracy, where private industries are going to have control of everything that we do. Education, electricity, water, everything is going to be privatized, which means everything is a profit. And let me tell you something. I used to think when I was younger that being privatized means more efficient. It does not mean so. It does not mean that it is going to be more efficient. What it definitely is that they are going to they're going to even sometimes make the service worse and yet still charge you an arm and a leg for the service that they are rendering to the people. Barbados PM Motley has been the most outspoken, or at least that has been the MO. Right. Well, what is she speaking out against? What is PM Motley speaking out against? Could you tell me? Could you tell us, Fancy, what is she speaking out against? Right? Because I don't know if she's different. I don't know if she's not doing similarly to what we are seeing in other Caribbean and the world at large. What our governments are doing for the most part. I don't see her doing anything that is different. How is she standing up to the global powers that be? Right? She made statements that sound very nice, rhetoric that sounds, that will rev up the people and make them believe that she's standing up for their rights. But at the same time, she is not there to do that, right? She's actually, trying to, do her job. And her job is to protect private industries and firms. Fred Corbin, who often appears on your programs here, was able to find out that that's Joe Biden bullied Trinidad and Tobago TNT into closing their oil refinery. I was unable to find information on this. Yes, wow, that is something to really do some investigation about. But that is what they do, because they want you now for them to control your oil refinery, and that is how the profits will go to them. Marie saying, how do we counteract this sort of bullying of Caribbean leaders? This is the sort of question that we're asking. How do we? And I want you to join in the conversation. But what I would say is that our Caribbean leaders cannot act single-handedly. They need our support, right? The problem is that they do not communicate very well to us, and we often do not know what is happening behind the scenes. If we known what is happening behind the scenes, then we would be able to back them, to back our governments, even when the United States is bullying it. But with what has happened to Venezuela this year in January, I don't know what much we can do, because the Venezuelans, for the most part, were backing Maduro. That's one of the reasons why they could not have taken him out, earlier, right? Because the population was backing him, and eventually they took him out, right? And they used betrayal, among other means, the CIA, right, to back him up. So I don't know if we can really back it off. The most we can do, as I'm saying, support our politicians when they're doing the right thing, and tell them that we're lending them our support. But at the end of the day, it seems to me, once you have a U.S. embassy and the CIA is there and all of that stuff, it's very difficult to wade them off. Very difficult. But it's a very important question that we should be reflecting on. Okay, that our leaders are not as strong, do not have the autonomy as we think that they do have. Right? These are things that we have to, grasp, and we have to begin to understand. Right? That is the question. That's the question that we need to. It's amazing how the chat is interactive, and the algorithm decides not to share the videos. Still, they're not very interested in sending the signals, the notification along the platform, so that people can see that the live is ongoing. Algorithm, please do your job and stop playing games with the program. Yeah, so that is what I think. I saw something here too from the article that was here from the Venezuelan Voice. What has unfolded in Venezuela since Maduro's detention on January 3rd represents the most sweeping redistribution that they're saying here of power inside Caracas in decades. I repeat that. What has unfolded in Venezuela since Maduro's detention on the 3rd of January represents the most sweeping redistribution of power inside Caracas in decades, according to sources close to Rodriguez, cited by the New York Times. Operating without public explanation, but frequently with White House approval and at times at Washington's direct instigation, Rodriguez has systematically dismantled the patronage network that sustained Maduro's 13-year rule. She has literally wiped out his legacy. That's what it's saying. And these are coming from Venezuelans now. It's not me. These words are coming, these are not my words. These are coming from Venezuelan voices. Stephen is saying that's what I said before. You cannot do too much when you have a U.S. embassy on your soil. You are not a sovereign country. We still need them, but what you're saying now is that the CIA really has taken over these embassies. They're no longer diplomatic. Before they were, like symbols of diplomacy between one country and the other. Now the CIA has taken complete control over these embassies, U.S. embassies, and they control them. They control them. And if you read the books by Chalmers Johnson, you're going to see how much the CIA is what directs the State Department. It's not an entity that practices diplomacy, right? Yeah, that's why I worded my statement the way I did. But she has warned of serious Caribbean fallout after the U.S. takeover of Venezuela, warning about the impact on small states right in the international order. It is going to have rippling, and it's already sending ripple effects on other parts of the Caribbean. Our governments are afraid, and that is why everybody is trying to fold their wings to the U.S. demands and requests. The ombudsman's office has an obligation to enforce political rights and guarantees so that the Venezuelan people have the possibility through mobilizations, deliberations, and their various forms of struggle and democratic participation to make known their point of view and struggle to defend it in the face of what is happening in the country, what is being negotiated, the demands of the aggressor, and the conduct of the national government. It is our obligation, they're saying here, to demand an end to the repression that has been unleashed against the Venezuelan people by the state and security forces. That fundamental rights of the working class, such as the right to a minimum wage, equivalent to the cost of the basket of basic goods, established in Article 91 of the Constitution, be restored, that all political prisoners be released, and that the rest of our democratic and political rights in general be deeply respected. It is not as a protectorate of the United States that we will recover our democratic freedoms. I repeat that, because many of us who think that the United States is going down there to reestablish the democratic process in Venezuela, then you are not living in the real world. It is not as a protectorate of the United States that we will recover our democratic freedoms and improve our standard of living as a people, nor is it by having a government that cooperates with and obeys Trump. Okay? We Venezuelans must resolve our internal problems with democratic guarantees for participation and organization, defending our sovereignty and deciding on the nation's resources. We demand that the Ombudsman's office issue a statement on the demands presented. No to U.S. military aggression against Venezuela, Trump out of Venezuela, Latin America, and the Caribbean. No to the collaboration of Delcy Rodriguez government with Yankee imperialism. Stop pressure. Now, let me ask you a question, ladies and gentlemen. What if we had actually all of the Caribbean, from Jamaica to Trinidad? Well, there was some of that. Let me just say that. I'm not going to now say that there was none of that. But what if we had had a mass protest against, from Jamaica to Trinidad to and Tobago to, Guyana, Grenada, all the Caribbean territories had come and say we're selecting a day, and we had mass protests in each Caribbean territory against what was happening in Venezuela. Do you think that they would have done successfully what they did? And these are the questions we have to ask ourselves. But our people, again, in the region are not properly informed, right? The Caribbean people are not properly informed. They are too distracted, too many gossips, and that is what they tend, and entertainment, that is what carries podcasts in the Caribbean, and people are just not aware of what really is happening in the geopolitical realm. They were never diplomatic. Look at history. Yeah, you're right. But the thing about it is that when you read the books like Chalmers Johnson, he said that days before there was some amount of diplomacy in terms of the ambassador was the one in charge. I think he said that after George Bush, after 9/11, that there was a transition where the CIA now became the official rulers of the State Department. And I think that he says that only about of the billions of dollars millions of dollars that they sent to the State Department, only a very minute portion goes toward diplomacy. Maybe 70%, 7%. He said that 93% goes toward the military-industrial complex. So the U.S. embassies are really a part of the U.S. military-industrial complex, and that is how they get news, and they they file lots of dossiers on the countries and people what they're doing, and they'll come after you, right? And again, that is how they also, some of our politicians go there and they give the U.S. information on what is happening in distinctive governments, in respective governments. Most of the Caribbean is owned by less than 100 oligarchs and dozens of corporate stakeholders, hence tax haven. Correct. And that is why our policies, and remember now that these oligarchs are also in collaboration with US oligarchs, right? So that is something that we have to understand too. Jurisdictions such as the Cayman Islands, British Virgin Islands, the St. Kitts and Nevis, and Belize remain the best possible choices for asset protection and offshore companies. And isn't Barbados one of them too? One of these offshore, you're correct. We have Dutch, British, and US stakeholders, etc. That's why they're controlled. Absolutely. That's why they're controlled. Soft power versus rights. Soft power versus hard power. Absolutely. That's what we're dealing with. Yeah, give it to us, Fonzie. This is what, have we all come together that Venezuela, who would have not been successful? It would have certainly sent a strong message to the government or domestic government, and also to the United States, that we mean business. Because what happened is that the governments, they were fearing that they would not have been able to get their visas, or sometimes their visas would have been canceled. In fact, the US is on record of threatening them that if they had not done what the United States told them to do, that they would have not actually gotten their visas. So they had to do what the US told them to do, right? The algorithm, you're not sending my videos to the right audience. Please send the videos to the right audience. I tell you, you are not doing that. We have the dog food is saying the sovereignty trap is real. America did get independence, but all the other revolution, Haiti, Grenada, Venezuela, was sovereignty trap lies. Corruption is necessary for lies sovereignty. Well, even Americans are now suggesting, and history is now being rewritten. If you read many books, that even Americans are not free, right? That the country, the freedom that they said that they got from Great Britain was all a lie. But for whatever it's worth, it's better there than it's better in our respective countries. So yes, I'll agree with you. Yes, as Stephen say, I agree with you. Yes, so we have to now begin to align ourselves, begin to inform ourselves, and say to our governments that we know what is happening, and we need to also act by saying that what they're doing is wrong. We cannot just sit down as we're doing and expect that the government is going to just single-handedly do what is right. Right? The government is not of the day, is not going to do what is right. Okay, and that is what we are saying that it is causing a lot of fears. Algorithm, please send the videos to the right audience so the people can get the thing, and stop sending it to the wrong audience where people are clicking out and clicking off. So we let us look a little bit more at what the article is saying here. In the 3 months since his arrest, she has replaced 17. Listen to what they're saying. In the 3 months since his arrest, that's Delcy Rodriguez, has replaced 17 ministers, overhauled military leadership, appointed new diplomats, and overseen the detention of at least 3 businessmen linked to her predecessor. Right? She has stripped most oil contracts from Maduro's family network, sidelined his relatives from state dealings, and opened the door to American oil and mining investors, all while governing a country that remains by any measure an authoritarian state. The why now is unambiguous: a convergence of American coercive power and Rodriguez's own long-cultivated political positioning has created a narrow window in which Venezuela's governing architecture is being recast, just as global energy markets reel from the disruptions caused by the Iran conflict. So it's one thing when they tell us that, Maduro had, these political dissidents in prison. Now we're hearing that Delcy Rodriguez, likewise, has imprisoned people who were on the side of Maduro, right? So this is what we're seeing. These are the contradictions that we're seeing in geopolitics. The scale of the purge is without precedent in recent Venezuelan history. Among its most significant casualties is General Vladimir Padrino Lopez, once considered one of the most powerful men in Venezuela and Maduro's longest-serving defense minister, who was removed from his post in March and reassigned to run the agricultural ministry. Maduro's son, Nicolas Maduro Guerra, and the son of his wife, Celia Flores, Yosel Gavidia Flores, have both been marginalized from lucrative state business dealings, according to government sources. In the same month, Rodriguez extended the purge to the armed forces, dismissing the entire Venezuelan military command. The question we have to ask, though, were Maduro and his family engaged in nepotism? Right? We also have to ask these very hard questions. And are our states now becoming channels through which these men and women and their families and their relatives can actually obtain lucrative contracts to enrich themselves and their families? Because we see that happening in the United States, in the Caribbean and Latin America, and it needs to stop, right? It needs to stop. And that is what we have to talk about. Conspiracy theory movie, they were trying to kill Mel Gibson in the movie, and his subscribers of 14 million? Are we safe? This group is very wise. Yes. Interesting. So we have to look at how these people and their relatives, their families, their friends are actually using the state as a means of obtaining what you call lucrative contracts, okay, in which they generate lots of money. Now, one figure has so far survived the call. They're saying here, Diosdado Cabello, the interior minister who allegedly oversaw the ruling party's repressive apparatus. Cabello, who faces U.S. charges alleging drug trafficking, has previously clashed with Rodriguez. Yet his ties to pro-government armed factions have made him both a valuable ally and a dangerous target. All right, so we're seeing lots of things happening here. The apparent ease, listen to what they're saying here, the apparent ease with which U.S. forces detained Maduro from a heavily fortified base has fed persistent speculation that he was betrayed by insiders who stood to benefit from his removal. A senior Venezuelan official declared the day after the American operation that a great betrayal had been committed. Russian officials who lost a key ally with Maduro's fall made similar remarks. So even the Russian officials were actually articulating that sort of suspicion. The Trump administration had been contemplating Rodriguez as a successor since 2025, maintaining indirect contact with her throughout that period, the Times reported. The political calculus for Washington has paid off. U.S. officials have been able to settle scores with Maduro allies who defied them while simultaneously consolidating Rodriguez's leadership, a transaction that has delivered tangible wins for both parties. Okay, so this is what is happening. We're seeing the level of betrayal that is coming out of Venezuela, and this should wake us up to understand that our political world is in trouble. And we are also in trouble, because the more we see this, make no bones about it, if they betray their one another, they betray each other, their colleagues and their, whatever, they are going to betray us too. When you asked about protests, I couldn't help but imagine the scene in Club Paradise. Yes, if we had sufficient protest actions in all these countries, but it would have to be united. All right, it would have to be united. The problem is that we are too divided. So some people were on the side of North Americans. They were saying that the United States was right to go to Venezuela and take out Maduro because Maduro was the socialist and he was keeping the country backward. So there were just so many divisions, and people don't know what is happening. They don't understand geopolitics, and they don't know how what is happening in Venezuela or what happened there is going to end up in our countries and would send ripple effects in the Caribbean, which it is now doing. And that is what happened after Maduro. Trump says that Cuba was next, and we saw exactly what is happening there in Cuba at the moment. All right, so these are things that we have to be aware of and we have to keep in mind. Now, those who were close to the former president insist that he never envisioned her as a successor. Let me repeat that, ladies and gentlemen. Those who were close to the former president, that's President Maduro, insist that he never envisioned Delcy Rodriguez as a successor, viewing her as a competent administrator rather than a leader. So what is here being suggested? Greetings, Pedro. Missed you yesterday, didn't see you in the live yesterday, and you're missed when you're not here. Yes, the fact is that that she was saying, well, they are saying that Delcy Rodriguez was not going to be considered as a successor of Nicolas Maduro. So more than likely, she's saying that, I'm not losing anything if I betray him. Okay, because I want to be leader. He doesn't see me in that capacity, and therefore I am going to betray him. Greetings. What do you think could have been done? That's a good question. What do we think? We were saying, Pedro Jamal, that what did we think could have been done? If we, the people, had stood up against what our respective countries were doing, perhaps something could have been done. But if we do not unite, because they can't kill all of us at once. Right, that's the problem is that they know the best way to do it, the best way to conquer us is to divide us and then distract us, and then they can defeat us. So while we are quarreling about what this is doing and the gossips and the whatever, they are busily making laws and doing what they normally do. Right? How many of us knew that Trump was going to send his special forces to just get Maduro on the 3rd of January? right? Which he did. And after he did it, nothing became of it. It was just like, oh, business as usual. All right? That was Venezuela. Bye. Right? And it doesn't mean anything to us for the most part. We think it's business as usual, yet still we keep on suggesting that we are trying to fight for freedom. Now, if we're fighting for freedom and we don't see what is happening in Venezuela and Cuba and other countries, do we think that when it comes to our time that we are going to be saved? We are going to be, ones to get away? I don't think so. I think that we're going to find ourselves in the same sort of problem. JA is on the verge of mass protests with the access to beaches movement. Yeah, that has always been a sort of situation there. I'm seeing it. I'm wondering if that too is a distraction. As much as I understand the importance of access to the beaches, but why now are they having this, everything is the beaches and there are lots of other things going on there that they need to talk about. Now, one of the things I don't like, I must say though, while protests, let me just be clear now, while protest actions are good, we need also to understand the root cause of the problems, right? Now, let us look at the beach access in Jamaica. Who causes these problems? Now, when we look at the laws there, are we attacking the laws? Or are we just attacking something, a beach thing, and we don't look at the laws and say this is what is happening and we have to get rid of the laws, right? So we have to get rid of the laws first. Having gotten rid of the laws, then we can begin now to proceed to do our protest. Because the fact of the matter is that the laws are what really govern our countries. Okay? And many times, unfortunately, we are not aware of the laws, whether the IMF or whatever laws that have been implemented in these countries, we are totally ignorant, and then the government does what it does, and they're not going to change things, right? They might give you an access here and there, but they're not going to change the laws for us. The laws have to be changed. Whose idea was regionalism? I think that it was many people's idea. I don't know if it was any one person. I told you there would have been no war. Well, there was a war. You think that what is going on in Venezuela is no war? There is a war. The fact of the matter is a war on the people. It's a war on their rights. It's a war on their autonomy. What's called it now? Their autonomy and their ability to make decisions on their own. It's a war, right? And it's a war on us too, right? They went there and took up a sitting president, Pedro, right? And that is not war, please. Right? That is war. Yes, the people might not have the arms to be able to challenge the United States, but it is war, right? You can't have a sitting president that the people decide that they put in power and just go down there and take him out like that, and without any sort of justification, right? Legal justification, I should say. If you read Foreign Affairs publication, they were talking about this for months, right? About the capture of Maduro, his going down there for the special forces. Now, that is what we're saying, that the special forces, we know that they were talking about, going to capture, to take him and so on. But the way in which they did it, it was something that caught people off guard, right? Nobody thought that they would have just gone down there the way they did it, right? And just took the man, in his pajamas and his wife and brought him home. They probably were expecting that there would have been some war, as Pedro is saying, and the people would have had to fight. So in terms of that did not happen because the U.S. found another way, having betrayed into their hands, and that could avoid war in the terms of the physical war. We protest BLM as if it was orchestrated, wink, wink. We protest BLM. Yeah, all these things are sometimes just make up, right? Make believe the BLM and all of that stuff. These are not the wars I'm talking about. A lot of these protests at the BLM are controlled by the CIA, right? And these groups. Right now, it seems as though, that's Marie saying, right now it seems as though the CIA may be instigating a race. Wow, I hope not. A race riot in Trinidad, and we are falling for the bait. We need to talk about that. That is not good. And they're trying to do that across every country right now. All of these race and ethnic divisions are coming to the fore again. Are you seeing that? And we need to address these things. And that's why I'm very leery I am here as much. We can talk about slavery, and we need to talk about it here too, and the injustices, but we must understand that we can't allow them to divide us, the ordinary people, because that is what they want to do. And then when they divide us, that is how they're going to divide the country and arrest us and take over the country. You're right. There's definitely racism, right? And I'm by no means denying this, absolutely. But we need to learn to be more strategic in dealing with it. Right. And there is a nefarious agenda where people now, most of us who've been to the United States, studied there, we're taking on this sort of racial component. We're taking on their culture. And I'm not saying there's no racism, as Marie's saying, in Trinidad and other countries, in Guyana. But what we're seeing is it's not the similar racism that you'd find in the United States. Right? And we just look at ourselves as black and whatever, and everybody's saying this is black and this is white and this is, where did we come from with that sort of ideology? And I think that is now pervading the entire Caribbean region, an American foreign sort of way of looking at race. And by no stretch of the imagination, as Marie's saying, can we say that we don't have racial problems. We do. Racial ethnic problems in the Caribbean, but we'll say that it's a different sort of texture, and we need to deal with our realities and not the realities of the United States of America that just defines itself as black, white, and Latino. All right. Okay, so we have the Asian, that they say. So that's so that we don't shoot ourselves in the feet, and that is going to happen. That is going to happen. And I can see how that is going to happen. We see sometimes people like the Lion Champions, and they come on the thing telling us that blacks are nice and whatever. We cannot begin to have these sort of simplistic ideas. We can present facts, historical facts, but we must not suggest that all Indians are wicked and all black people are wicked and all this and that. We must stop that. We must stop that and accept people based on their individual characteristics and not based on the characteristic of the group, right? Because not because I'm a member of this country, citizen of this country, means that I represent everybody or I do everything that the entire mass of people do. And that is how people sometimes judge us, and it's not the right way to judge people. We all behave like that, but it's dangerous when we behave like that, and the entire country is going to be affected. Racist speaks of race, and race, not personality. Right. And it's not that we should not address racial tensions and racial problems, but we have to address them in a way that we do not try to, add fuel to the fire, right? Because when we add the fuel to the fire, it can be worse than what we were anticipating, what we had bargained for, right? And she's right. It's something that we probably need to have an open discussion about. All right, the sort of Indo Trinidadians and the Afro Trinidadians and all the racial ethnicities in Trinidad and also in Guyana. All right, I think we've done something like that before. Maybe we can call Mr. Pereira another time. He has strong views on that. Can black be racist? I think so. I think anybody can be racist. Right? Some people some people say, oh, black can't be racist because they don't have access to power or whatever. I don't think so. I don't buy that, because some of our people, not many, not the majority of us, but some of us do have access to power. Obama had access to power. Many of our prime ministers and presidents have access to power, right? And there are other black people who are very wealthy and they have access to power, right? So the black people can actually demonstrate racism. If you are saying that all the members of another group, right, are terrible or evil, you are racist, right? You can't come up with that. You can't put everybody into one box, right? We have to be careful in terms of expressing our ideas. We want to express truth, but not in that simplistic manner. And this is a rather interesting topic that we have to deal with, because there are problems, even in Venezuela, in terms of the racial tensions that are there. And did the Bolivarian Revolution address these problems in the way that it should have been addressed? Most of our nations do not speak about racism openly. It's something that's a taboo subject, but we have to now find ways in which we are going to, deal with these very uncomfortable problems. And they're uncomfortable on both sides. On both sides. Okay? Um, they don't feel so. Yeah, black people don't feel so, because we have been brainwashed at university that black people can't be racist, because we do not have, we don't have the power that, other particular white people, according to them, have. But I think that anybody can, because let us say that, a community is predominantly black, a village or whatever, and you have some whites there and some Indians, then you can be racist, right, towards those people. I remember you had racial riots in Jamaica, for example, that many Chinese people in the 70s, I think, or the 60s, that many of them left because there was a huge race riot between black Jamaicans and Chinese Jamaicans, because black Jamaicans thought that the Chinese were moving up the economic ladder too quickly. And there was a massive race riot there, and some opted to leave. So there are times when we can have, when black people, depending on whatever, and we do not, let me say, tolerate violence on this platform, right? We do not tolerate violence. If somebody attacks you, you have to defend yourself. And I'm not suggesting that. I can't be stupid. Somebody takes up, whatever to hit you, and you have to defend yourself. But we are not here suggesting that we should go and kill people, right? Because their ancestors and the people who look like them are the ones who are actually stealing and doing whatever. And oftentimes what I have noticed, ladies and gentlemen, that the culprits, the ones who are really guilty, are the ones who get away. We often kill the innocent people. And that is what happens. We often kill the innocent ones because we can't get access to the real power brokers. Doy Trini saying, have you ever been to Trinidad? No, I have never been to Trinidad, but I would like to come there. And I've read a lot of things about it. And I had a lot of Trini friends in the United States, lots of Trini. In fact, my adopted mother was from Tobago, and lots of Trinis also were around, which I had fun time and memories of. So I'm adopted Trinidadian or Tobagonian, if you will. Some intellectuals, Pedro is saying, some intellectuals teach that the black man can't be racist. I was told, yes, but we can be racist. Anybody, whether you're Indian or you're black or you're white, you can be. If you are expressing unfavorable views and you have this attitude, hostile attitude toward another ethnic group, you are racist. If you have no evidence, of course, if you have some evidence, then you can, but if you have no evidence, just because you see that person represents, a certain group, then you are racist. Right? You should have a neutral attitude. If you don't know anybody, you don't know the person, you have an open mind until you have evidence to suggest otherwise, that this person is racist or is not a nice person, right? But to say that everybody is evil, and let me say something to you guys, what you feed your minds on, that is what you are going to be. Right? You can't get up every morning and feed your mind on negative stuff. Even the news, let me tell you something. Even some of the news items, sometimes I get up in the morning and I do not read any news. I don't read any news at all. Why? Because sometimes it's not healthy for our psychology. Right? And it destroys your entire day. It destroys your mood, your attitude. So the same thing for history. If you get up every morning, feed your mind that the white man was wicked, and you read about all the terrible things that he did to black people every day, it's going to affect your being. I'm not saying you should not try to read and to make sure you understand what happened in history, but if that is what you're reflecting on every day you get up, right, it's going to affect your very being and your attitude toward people, and you might develop unnecessary hatred for another group just because of what happened in history. Don't get me wrong, Learn as much history as you can, just like I must, be aware of the news, but I cannot allow myself to be absorbed by a lot of the negativity. Sometimes I just walk away from it, don't turn on the computer, and just live my day, right? Because it will affect you. It will affect you. And I see people coming on the platform and telling us that white people are evil. That these are the people who get up every morning and they're reading these things. And these things are affecting us psychologically. And some people get crazy. Don't get me wrong. I've been to university, and many teachers sometimes they do get crazy because they focus too much on the injustices that happened in the past. Okay? While you're doing that, try to look at something positive and it will help you. Good evening. Good evening. Thank you for joining. Good evening. We're having a very interesting discussion here. We're looking at Venezuela's oil U-turn, and TNT partnership raises big questions. Pedro is saying, when I realized Africans were complicit in the slave trade, I took a different view. Well, yes, but at the same time, we want to be balanced in everything we say to Pedro. So we don't want to say that, most Africans were, right? Just in the same way that Caribbean people, Trinidadians and Tobagonians, during the war, the buildup of the war on Venezuela, we can't say that the majority of Trinidadians and Tobagonians were, in league with what Miss Camel Person Cesar was doing. Right, so we have to be careful, because when history is written, we don't want them to say that that was the case, because lots of Trinidadians and Tobagonians were not in agreement with what their prime minister was doing in supporting the United States in the capture of Nicolas Maduro. Right, and sometimes we can talk at because a few did. We said that yes, Trinidadians were involved. So we don't want also to give the illusion that most Africans were involved in the trade, because they were not. A few businessmen, we can say, would have been, because that is how humans behave, right? Money is the root of all evil. The love of money, I should say. You skip, Fungzi, I read all of your comments. You always comment. I read every comment here, because not many of you are online. So all the comments I read, whether I agree with them or not, all of them I put. Which one did I skip? I read, but let me read this one, because I normally read all the comments, because not many people are online, and I like your comments. I like your comments, Fungzi. When you were giving lots of history last night, it was sort of a little off, but you tend to be very brilliant in your comments. You skipped my last comment about the blackout and worship. I didn't see that. And also, if you don't see your comments, sometimes YouTube might be blocking your comments. Don't think I am the one who is literally blocking your comments. Sometimes YouTube may actually block your comment. All right, so you can ask me if I saw it, but don't say that I skipped it, because I don't normally skip. If I had hundreds of you online, I would, because I can't see everything, but I don't have many people online, so I can read all of your comments. So when it comes to Trini, I find, is it Imran Nazar Hussein, an interesting character that addresses foreign affairs from a so-called Muslim perspective. Okay, so I will try to look at him, Imran Nazar. Okay, and is he very balanced in his perspective? You say it's a Muslim perspective. Is that Muslim perspective a balanced perspective? Please let me know. Why are you implying that I'm saying that? No, I'm not saying that you're saying that, Pedro, but I know that people do say that, like, they say because a few Africans were involved, it just almost like, it takes away the blame from what the Europeans did, right? Well, because the Africans were involved, so, but yes, there were elements of African, complicity, right? But at the same time, it did not give the Europeans the right to have gone and treated the peoples of African descent and Africans the way how they did, right? It was terrible. Never said most, right? I'm not saying you said that, certainly not. But I'm saying that there is this sort of thing where we like to generalize and say this black and white, everything is black and white, and we're saying it's more textured, it's more nuanced than we say slavery was nuanced. It was not just black and, there are so many factors involved. The Catholic Church, religion, all of these things were also factors in it, right? Many people don't talk about that, but we forget sometimes the role that the Catholicism, religion played in the trafficking of individuals, right? And we said that to my extent, when I read slavery, I see a lot of religious undertones, in terms of the slave master just want to be worshipped, right? Having this sort of propensity, wanting another human being to worship you and to do whatever you say for him or her to do, right? It had a lot of religiosity in that sort of trade. The blacks make it sound like all the whites were involved, and that too, very well said. That too, that is also another argument. Black people also make it seems like all white people were involved in the trade. This is also another error that many of us make. Most white people weren't. In fact, when you read the Black Reconstruction, particularly in the South, W. Du Bois, he described in a very explicit manner the fact that many of these whites in the southern parts of the United States were just a tad beneath the blacks. They were like in living in huts and mud huts. They were looking nasty and dirty and unkempt, and that's why some white people in the North wanted slavery to end, because when you went to the South, it was depressing to see not only the way how these black people were living in their enslaved condition, but how the whites, the predominant white population in the South, were living. They were not living much better than the slaves. The only ways that the only what do you call it now, advantage that they had was the fact that they had their freedom, right? And they could probably, if they were ambitious enough, they could go to the North or somewhere else to equal to living. But many of them chose to remain in the South, and it was not pretty, right? It was not a pretty sight. So let's be balanced, as Pedro is saying. We cannot think that all white people were involved in the trade. Yes, people will say to me, but they benefited. Yes, they did eventually benefit. We cannot also not acknowledge that the fact that the U.S. after slavery, implemented like Jim Crow laws, and even in the Caribbean, we had to pay them what? We had to pay them reparations. Can you imagine that we had to pay them for freeing us, for giving us in Haiti? They also paid the reparations, right? So yes, we can say that they benefited from it, and these are the conversations we need to have. Sometimes even your own family members might benefit from their political affiliation, not because they could control it, but sometimes you benefit because that is how it works. So if you're our daughter or son of a politician and they have lucrative, access to business and contracts, then they're going to be way ahead of you. It's life. Life is unfair, and that's what we have to understand. We are not living in a righteous world. And many people are saying, oh yeah, you're stupid because you're thinking about heaven and earth. Yeah, heaven is not going to be on earth. Cannot be on earth. Not with our people. Because humans by nature are selfish. Okay, and that's what we have to understand. That is what created slavery. The selfishness of human beings as a whole. Or the church. Before I come to your comment, let me see what he's saying about the church helped fought to end slavery too. Right. So, and that is what we're talking about, how textured the conversation, how nuanced we have to debate and to have a conversation, because it's not just black and white that the church was evil, as some people say, oh, the church evil, because the church also, as Pedro is saying, helped. Without them, we would not have freed. White people also helped black people to have gained their freedom. So that's why we cannot just say this is black and white. All right. And I'm sure lots of black people, Pedro too, lots of black people in Africa fought to have ensured that their brothers and sisters were not sold into slavery. So while some might have aided, others were fighting, but perhaps was not able to overpower the powers that be. Right? So yes, these are the sort of discourses we want to have on this platform. We just don't want to come and say this is X, Y, Z, and it is set in stone. Right? Human beings are just not that controllable. Hossein is an author and scholar that specializes on Islamic eschatology, finance, and political commentary. He also was a former Foreign Service officer in Trinidad, and most don't grasp his shit. Well, yeah, but okay, so that is true. But I would like to know, do you think he's balanced? Having said that, having given all of that sort of, very important read up on him, the introduction, that is, the party that fought to keep slaves invented Jim Crow laws and now are race bait on steroids. Yeah, because the parties have always, what you say, they always change. They always take on new personalities. Remember now that politicians are not also set in stone, and that they can change today, tomorrow they say something else different, right? So the Democratic Party, as you're saying, was the party of racism and of slavery, but eventually they were the party also of, that gave African Americans their civil rights. So that is how it works. What I say to people, work with them as far as you see them are doing something for your condition to improve on your lives. You can't just say, I am a PNM for life, right? Or I am a PNP or JLP for life, or I'm a Democrat for life or a Republican for life. That is stupidity, because the politicians change with the time and they evolve. But we have to evolve with them too, right? And look keenly and closely at what they're doing, and not what the party, because your parents belong to this party for their lives, for all their lives. And that's what we do, and it's affecting us. He is very involved in reaching out to Eastern Orthodox right now and encourages Muslims to court Russia. He travels around the globe to many countries and gives lectures. But why Russia? Why is he telling people to court Russia? Is that going to help us? Is Russia going to free us? That's what I would like to know. Why is he saying that Russia is the country that we should court, right? I am not pro any country, right? Any country that you desire to live, that's your, that is your freedom to decide. So if you want to go to Russia, fine with me. China, anywhere we want to go, we can live. The fact is, why select Russia? That's what I would like as a country for, to have a group of people en masse migrate or immigrate to that country. Andrew, the Arabs were trading slaves long before the Europeans, correct, got involved in the Atlantic slave trade. That is so true. And slavery has always existed, from the beginning of humanity. Slaves have always existed, not in the way that the Europeans had it. That's the difference. Now, the Europeans, they went to the extreme, and they described slaves as chattels, that they were not, they were not human beings. Okay, that was not what the other people of the other slave trade did. It was brutal too. Some of the slave trades in the Arab slave trade, the Egyptian slave trade, these trades were also extremely, brutal. But the fact is that the Europeans took it to another level. It was demonic what they did, right? And the way in which they treated, because the slaves practically could not gain their freedom for the most part, right? And it was just a horrific system that, wow, don't know how they themselves became rather crude. So slavery just did not, affect the black man, the Negro, but it also affected white people and their psychology. And sometimes when you look at them, sometimes you really wonder if some of their descendants are not suffering from the mental, psychological, what should I say now, depravity that happened during slavery. Right? It has some sort of impact on their lives too. Great impact, because we're humans. At the end of the day, we're humans. And if I go to a country and I see many people there being slaughtered, it's going to affect me. It's going to affect you psychologically, because you're a human being. No, he's not balanced per se. I see him more as a foreign affairs personality that uses Islamic trappings to influence the Muslim community, in particular political directions. It would be interesting though. Do they have a strong Muslim community in Russia? Why? And I'm still saying, why Russia? Why would they want to go to Russia? Is Russia very, what you call it now, welcoming of Muslims? Maybe they are, because it's a very diverse country. Russia. That's why Malcolm X want human rights later in his life and saw civil rights as a fake. I think both are important, right? Because without civil rights, you can't have human rights. So the both of them are interlinked, right? You need to have some civil rights, and then you will be able, like, for example, Pedro, a civil right is a freedom of expression, right? Freedom of conscience. Those are civil rights. So if you now see somebody's rights being impinged on, violated, then you should have the civil right to be able to express that that person is being, rights are being violated, and it should not be. But if you don't have civil rights, you can't have human rights, right? So both are very, very important in societies, in any given society. Has anything that Steve is saying, has anything changed because I live here in Georgia? Where in where in change where in the United States, in Trinidad? Where are you saying? Talking about Stephen? Yeah. So we have Pedro Jamati saying the Arabs castrated the males. All was brutal. Yeah, they were brutal. But the degree of it, though, did they call them chattel? And the Europeans did a lot of things like that too to their slaves. Marie saying there are a few prophecies that say that Russia will help people of African descent in the last days, okay? But it's a controversial prophecy. It isn't a mainstream school of thought. Well, as I was saying last night, Marie, I'm not sure in anywhere in the Bible that God refers to, the Bible tends to describe people. Yes, we know that there were some groups of people in the Bible that God hated, and he asked the Jews, his people, to destroy them. But generally speaking, the two peoples of the earth that will be on the earth at the final analysis is the people who of God and the people who are not of God. So whether you are wherever you come from, but you are going to be a man of God. But I don't know if I've seen Russia as a place that is going to help Black people. I would have to see that now too. Are we seeing Russia as a place that is particularly kind to Black people? Do we see that? Or is it a place that might be anti-Black? I don't know. I've just seen and read stories. Maybe you have read stories in which they are kind to Black people, but I've read a lot of stories and heard people speak of the rabid racism that exists in Russia. I brought him up. One of the things about it, and you need to read the book by Professor Orlando Patterson, who is a professor at Harvard University. And he spoke about slavery and social debt. It's freedom. Sorry, the book is Freedom in the Making of the West. Freedom in the Making of the West, in which Patterson argued that it's interesting that without slavery, the West would not have accommodated freedom. Wow, that is something that you have to think. And it is true. They went to an extreme with slavery, right? And it is through that extreme that they understood what freedom is about. And guess who understood it? Nobody but Black people. Black people were the only ones. I'm not sure if we still have that consciousness because we have moved away from slavery for some times now. But after slavery, there was nobody on this earth, particularly here in the West, who understood what freedom meant like Black people, right? In fact, it was Black people who fought for freedom in the United States. Lots of white people never had freedom until after the Civil War. And there's the Black people who fought during the Reconstruction era for them to have obtained those freedoms. Right? So that is what we have to understand. These are things we have to understand. But I think that what is happening now in our world is that we have become so much, confused and, I don't know where we're going. But stop being emotional about it, that it was the norm in those times. No, it's being emotional. So you're telling me that somebody should just go and castrate, and you're not being emotional. You wouldn't express an emotion, and that's what we can also become desensitized, Pedro. Right? That is what they did. We have to make sure that we don't just see it as something of a time. It was abnormal. It was abnormal, and that is what they did. Eventually, they became desensitized, and the system was continuing if if there wasn't a civil war. All right, so we can't become desensitized. I'm seeing even crime and violence in some of our countries becoming the norm because we just say, "Oh, it's a time. That's what people do." Is that so? The whites won civil rights or had human rights. The whites won civil rights or had human rights. Well, I think that they had the civil rights. Remember now, that human rights is a new invention. I do not necessarily ascribe to human rights. I more ascribe to civil rights. I tell you why. The government really cannot give you human rights because the same government that gives you human rights is the same government that can take away your human rights. But civil rights now are what should be. Nature gives us that, right? Nature is what gives us the or civil rights, but humans give you human rights, if you know what I mean. Okay, stop worrying about what they were called. They were being shackled. What would you call it? Yeah, well, I'm not worrying about it. I'm just suggesting that it was inhumane. All right. Marie saying there is a strong Islamic community, or in Russia especially. Okay, I never knew that in Dagestan. Okay, yeah, well, that's good. That's good. And we have the Fangzi saying he outwardly speaks little of the West as part of the MO and has created his own form of eschatology as a tool to cloak his international agenda. The fact of the matter is that I've always speak about the West. What are you doing? Oh, you're talking about the man. Oh, that I get what you're saying. I'm getting you. Sorry about that, Fauci. You're talking about the journalist in Trinidad. Okay, the Islam guy, the Muslim guy. Forgive me. So we're talking about the political climate here in the South when it comes to the Democratic Party. Of course, we want you, Stephen, to tell us what is happening there. We want you to tell us what is happening in southern part of the South of in Georgia in the United States. I love that. Okay, and Georgia is a nice state to live in, even though people say it's racist. If you watch recent Russian action military films, you'll see that the racial prejudices related to their African neocolonial projects, taking a page out of Hollywood's propaganda playbook. Interesting. Yeah, I think that as Marie is suggesting, I think that we have to travel and to travel and visit the world and with an open mind, rather than putting people, as we're seeing, in boxes. So maybe Russia, I will have to do that too, and have my own experience to see if they are really tolerant of Black people. I respect Russian culture. Yes, they're very what you call it now, sophisticated people and bright people. Yes, that I'm going to have to agree with. I respect Russian culture and enjoy learning about their history, but eyes wide open when observing the field. Absolutely. I don't know, but let me not say anything because I've never lived there and I'm not the most brilliant and most informed on Russian culture. I would have to admit. You look at your Bezmenov yet? What is that? What is the Bezmenov? Is that a Russian name? Don't even know what you're talking about, Pedro. That's true. Yes, we have Sheikh Imran Hossein has visited Russia. Okay, good. So it means that he understands. And there is a large community of of Muslims, you're saying, Marie, who live in Russia. Very interesting. Very interesting. Maybe we need to have a guest here from Russia to give us more perspective, or somebody who probably a Black person who has lived in Russia and could give us some, a more balanced perspective in terms of what Russia has to offer people of African descent. Now, Venezuela's traditional economic elites, formerly aligned with the opposition but reconciled to the Chavez's system, are also among those benefiting from her economic restructuring. Their bet on stability over democracy has for now bought them access to foreign markets and the American banking system. So that is what I hear many people saying, including Mr. Pereira, that she did that. She accepted the position for stability, but that is just a simplistic sort of understanding of what she did. They're not going to just have her there to do whatever she wants to. Far from that, the CIA is right on the land, and they are going to control her. None of this, Venezuelan opposition figures warn, amounts to political reform. The opposition has consistently maintained that Rodriguez, rather than returning the country to democracy, is entrenching her own rule. Opinion polls suggest most Venezuelans welcome the end of Maduro's tenure, sustained as it was through violence, corruption, and alleged electoral fraud. But many remain deeply skeptical of his successor. So obviously they didn't want Nicolas, what's her name, Rodriguez to be president, but neither did they want Maria Conchado to. What's her name? Maria, I forgot her name. They didn't want her to be president. So is it that Venezuela is anti-women in terms of anti-women presidents? Because they neither wanted Delcy Rodriguez, neither did they want Maria. That's the opposition leader of the other party, right? The Conservative Party. Rodriguez, as one senior official put it, is deploying the threat of American coercion as a tool to pursue power brokers within the ruling party who were previously considered untouchable. The result is a political victory for both Trump and Rodriguez, but not necessarily for Venezuelans awaiting something more than a change in the name at the top. In the fiery speech he gave on January 4th, the one in which he vowed not to inherit a legacy of traitors, Rodriguez was flanked by the very figures she would go on to discard. The general she called a comrade now runs the farming ministry. The party barons who stood shoulder to shoulder with her have been sidelined, detained, or cowed into silence. Whether the woman who made the speech genuinely believes in a different Venezuela or is simply the latest strongman or strongwoman in a country that has never lacked for them remains a question that neither Washington's approval ratings nor Caracas' reshuffled cabinet can answer. So whether we like it or not, there is betrayal. Betrayal is there in Venezuela, right? A KGB defector, that's what Pedro is saying here. And then we have, in the 80s, and Fongzi saying here, online foreign affairs personality, that's Jamari Thomas. Yes, I know Jamari Thomas would be a good guest that could speak to Russian politics. Yes, I probably would need to get him. Why I've not invited anybody here yet is because YouTube algorithm has been acting funny for the past couple months, and I'm wondering, should I waste their time? But as soon as the algorithm begins to get normal, hopefully it will in short space, then I'll begin to invite more guests on the platform. Maria Corina Machado, right. She is the one, Pariska. Yeah, she's the one that they didn't want. They refused her. And also we're learning now that Maduro did not see Miss Delcy Rodriguez as a successor to him. So is it that the system, the Venezuelan system, is anti-women president to be, rejecting both from different parties? Seems a little bit skeptical. I don't know. All right. You could answer that question. Jamari is in the mix with all the popular so-called independent journalists and has interesting MO. Yes, we'll try to get him on as soon as we see some normality restored to YouTube in terms of the algorithm setting up the videos. I will invite some other guests to join us to speak on interesting matters like what you're telling me about. So I think this is something very interesting, and I thought I would share it with you. It's a very interesting story, and I think that we need to watch how it's going to move on from here, and what will be the benefits for Trinidad and Tobago and for Venezuela, if any. If there's going to be any benefit. I doubt there'll be any benefit for the people, for the ordinary man and woman. I think that it will be more for the oligarchs and the politicians. Why he had her as his vice president? That's a very good question. I think that's a very good question. Why do you think that Nicolas Maduro had her? Because I think she, her father is coming from, is like very important personality in Venezuela, was, because he's now deceased. So perhaps that she inherited that sort of legacy. And some people, by the fact that they are linked to some family, legacy or whatever, you just have to have them whether you like it or not. Right? They're still important in the country, and I think she will. And she's extremely brilliant, I understand. She is. I think she speaks English and Spanish. I think she studied in England. And I think she's an excellent administrator. He did say that. Remember now we said that. Remember we said, Pedro, that he did mention that Maduro did mention that Delcy Rodriguez is an excellent administrator. She's just not a good leader. There is a distinct difference between being an excellent administrator and a good leader. Maria Corina Machado Parisca visited the Vatican recently, and she did that after, before, when Delcy, after the capture of of Maduro, she also went to the Vatican because she really wanted the presidency. And she knew that Trump had said that he was not going to give it to her. So she went personally to the Vatican to ask the Pope, the then Pope, if he would have given her the position. And it seems like he told her no. So, she's back. I'm not sure where she is now. Where is Maria? Is she in the States, or is she back in Venezuela? I don't even know. It's a little surprising that she did not succeed with her plans. Yeah, I think they saw her as being divisive. If they had taken her, I don't think, because they probably would want her, but I don't think she is neither a good administrator, neither is she a good leader. I don't think they had any confidence. And the people in Venezuela did not have any confidence in Maria. All right. They have more confidence in Delcy Rodriguez. That they do have. They have more confidence, even the military. Remember also that Venezuela is also a military country. And I think the military also had more confidence in Delcy than they had in Maria. Maybe, right. Maybe that's why. Exactly so. So that's the whole thing. She doesn't seem to be any good leader. She doesn't have that sort of history, that Delcy. Because even though Delcy, let's be fair to her, even though she might have been a traitor, but she does have skills, right? She has diplomatic skills, and she has excellent administrative skills. But according to them, we don't know. We can't say because we don't know her personally. According to what they're reporting in Venezuela, she is not a good leader. But we're still asking the question, what does it mean to be a good leader? Is it because they were expressing some sort of discrimination toward women? We don't know. And we don't want to get into that rabbit hole. We're just asking some questions. And if there are any Venezuelans, I should say, who are listening to the program, they can tell us what they think, those who know her better than I do. Maria Corina Machado is a Zionist. She is. But, the fact of the matter is that many of our politicians are. Give her, let's be fair to her, though. Many of our politicians are, that's Maria, right, Maria. Many of them are Maria, including Andrew Holness, and many of these people are Zionist for whatever it is. Chevron is currently the only U.S. oil company actively operating in Venezuela, while ExxonMobil, ConocoPhillips, and other firms are exploring re-entry opportunities and the recent political changes. And they will go back because right now they have the environment that, they can control and do whatever they want according to U.S. standards. So they will eventually get back there. That's no problem right now. We in the region consider a good leader as a person who talks tough, right? You're right about that. But if that is the case, and if that is the standard, Pedro, I think that, what's her name? Delcy Rodriguez is a good leader because she was talking tough. When during the buildup of the war in Venezuela, well, you say it's not a war, or the kidnapping, the buildup of the kidnapping of Nicolas Maduro and his wife. The fact is that, she did a lot of hard talking, tough talking, didn't she? Yeah. She looks like a leader, and she looks like somebody who has some experience. Or I don't know her. So Venezuelans who are on the soil should be able, or maybe in the diaspora, should be able to speak more on her than I can do. I won't say I can. I'm not qualified to do that. We have here the another by Ponce. The why is it okay? Halliburton and SLB are positioned to support Venezuela's oil recovery. Yeah, but you see, when we say recovery, they're just there to arrest the thing, expropriate. Already, Trump is suggesting that the funds from the proceeds of the oil will be sent to one of these Middle Eastern countries. I can't remember if it's Qatar or Saudi Arabia. I think it could be Qatar. So the Venezuelans are not going to be benefiting from the proceeds of this, all of these 3 billion or billions of barrels of oil per day that they are intimating here. Marie saying some of Venezuela's oil is being filtered to Israel these days, right, under Delcy Rodriguez. So the war is also the oil. I'm saying the war. The oil is also to help the war efforts there in the Middle East. So Trump is strategic. Trump is strategic. Before he actually went to Iran, before he started the war with Iran, and we have to talk about Iran, sometimes probably this week, because that is also a very important topic that they're having some sort of another, what do you call it, peace treaty or whatever you call it, whatever they're doing now. We don't even know what they're doing, right? But whatever they're doing, right? Whatever Trump and these people are doing, we need to talk about that, because the fact that he actually went to Venezuela, then he has to get oil from Venezuela. That will help him with his war efforts, more money. All of these things, we have to look at these things. They are all strategic. They are all strategic. A ransom was asked for the kidnapping. Wow. Do you have any evidence, Pedro? Who said that a ransom was asked? And what was the ransom? Recovery. Okay, you're correcting here. And then we have Marie saying Israel will get what she wants regardless of who is leading Venezuela. Absolutely. Because the United States now control the oil industry, the oil fields and the oil and gas fields. So anything, and remember now that without oil and gas, they can't do what they're doing with the wars. They need that. So when they're talking about renewables and their economies is moving into renewables, do you think they will ever get rid of fossil fuels? I don't think so. I don't think so. Will the renewables have them to go to war? But I guess through AI and whatever, maybe, I don't know. Pedro Damati saying yes, the trade routes, yes. And we have Fonsi saying it's all contingent on legal protections for foreign investors. Absolutely, it's all of that. All that matters is that. Welcome, WHZ. Haven't seen you for some time. Stealing Venezuela oil, USA believes belong to USA. Absolutely, and more to not into the USA. WHZ, it's to the oligarchs. And these people don't think that they belong to any country. Their nationality is money, right? Their only nationality is money and the resources of the world, right? They don't see themselves as Americans or Canadians or whomever. We have Pedro Diamante saying the statement on ransom, was a question. Let me go back to the question. Pedro Diamante is asking, and can anybody answer this question? A ransom was asked. Was a ransom asked for the kidnapping of Maduro? Didn't they post some money or whatever that if they wasn't there like a 50, was it the 50 million on the arrest of Nicolas Maduro? There was a bounty or something of the sort. Yeah, I think that there was something that they were offering people, like a $50 million. Anybody who would be willing to give information on the rest to arrest Nicolas Maduro. I think yes. I think that there was something of the sort. Yeah. Yes. It wasn't. It was how many? What was it? How much was it? Yeah, it was 50 million. Right. It was 50. No. Oh, it was 50,000. It was 50,000. Just 50,000. Was it just 50,000? I thought 50,000 was just a little amount of money. I think it was more. I think it was, but I could check. You could check for me. Please check for me. We have just sign your life. I mean your name on the dotted line, and you could have data right center in a town near you. That's true. That's true. That is true. We're living in some very, very nasty times. A ransom was for his capture, right? And it was 50 million. Yeah, it was 50 million. Yeah, because 50,000, is a lot of money. For me, I'm poor, but to do a major operation like that, it would be like 50 million, right? Because people would have to do, there's a lot of things that go into that, and information, and yeah, you have to pay them big dollars. And I knew that he would have been captured based on the amount of money. Remember now that they were increasing it. I think under Trump first term, it was like 15 million. And under Biden went up to like 25 or 20 million. And then Trump, doubled it to 50 million. Right. So yeah, so it was gradual increase, Marie, from the first Trump administration into the Biden administration, and then the Trump administration came and doubled it. Yeah, that's to my recollection. That's what happened. So, so all of them, from the first Trump administration to Biden and Trump's second administration, they were all complicit, right? And they really wanted him, and they were working a long time to get him right. Biden was 25 million, correct, and Trump doubled it to $50 million. So when I saw that, I know that he was going to get it. He was going to be captured or betrayed. If you think Trump is seeking 50K, right, then I have a beachfront ride timeshare in Greenland to sell you. Right. Yeah, he's not going to, he's not, this whole thing is just confusing. It's just like, I don't know what to make of it. I don't know what you're making of it. I don't know what to make of it with Nicolas Maduro, and what is happening in Venezuela. It just seems all phony to me. Even the one in Iran, we're not going to talk about Iran right now. We leave it for another day. But this, I think we need to read. I think that Trump has not yet published the agreement that they have for this other, how many days of treaty or peace, or what they're signing, 50 or 60 days, I don't know. But we need to read what they're doing, because the more we read, we're going to look at the clauses and some of the things that they are saying that might not necessarily be what they are doing. So we need to look at that. But the whole Venezuelan Iran thing seems to be fraudulent. Today they're having a peace treaty, tomorrow they're striking, then they go back into a peace treaty, then they strike again. I don't know what the hell they're doing. Right? At least in Bush's time, right? In George Bush's time, he went to Iraq and he started to bomb. Right? And there was no afterwards trying to say we're going to have peace treaty with Iraq. It's just too much. It's just too much. And the same thing was happening in Venezuela too. One time Trump was, having discussions with Maduro. The next time they're at war. The next time, it was just a lot of back and forth that did not make any sense. Confusing, right? Listen to Trump. His lips are loose. Yeah. And the entire thing that they're doing there is just not normal. It's like we're now seeing something that is staged. But at least when you're watching a movie, you can follow the plot, right? In the movie, you can try to follow what is happening in the plot. In what is happening there now in Washington, D.C., you can't follow what's going on. You just don't know what's going on. They tell you this thing, you read about it, and they say, okay, they'll strike again. They're going to have a war. Then they say tomorrow, no, we're not going to have a war. We're going to have a peace. Then they're striking while they're having the peace. Then, yeah, I don't know what's going on. And I can't say I do know. I'll be lying. He is hem-hawing, trying to strong-arm them without sending in troops. That's what he's doing. I think the Trump strategy right now, as you're suggesting, is trying to let the guard down of the so-called people that he's fighting with, right? And then eventually, when their guards are down, he strikes. Right? And that's exactly what happened to Venezuela. I think that Venezuela's guard had been let down because after a while, they were tired. You get them tired psychologically, and then you strike. And that's exactly what Trump is doing. Will being distracted by something very big I think so. We are being distracted by something that is going to happen. There's a big thing something is lurking. Something is lurking in the secret sanctums of these people. And we don't know, but something is going to happen and it's going to catch the entire world off guard. This, what is happening, people, is not normal. Don't allow the news media to control you so much that you think that what you're seeing is what you are getting. That is not true. Stephen Knight is suggesting here, and the whole Maduro trial is a sham. I think so too. They don't have anything on this man. Yeah, and they just have him there. They just have him there in prison, right? Does it make any sense? Why don't you send the man back home? You got him, or send him to another country. Just send him to another. But that is what they were telling him, though, you know. In fairness to them, if it is true what they're telling us, they did tell him that he needs to go to another country. And if he goes to another country, and what's his name, Rubio keeps on saying that, even today, that if he had just obeyed them and gone to another country, exiled himself to another country, they would not have gone for him, because he could have taken his assets and everything that he owned and lived peacefully somewhere in Russia or somewhere they wanted him to go. I can't remember the name of the country. Intimidation. And then we have Michelle is saying the back and forth is about inside trading. It's about futures and the stock market. You're correct. You're correct. It's all have to do with money. And there was a video I was watching, Michelle, and the video was suggesting that she's tired. An American girl was saying she's tired of waking up every Monday morning and hear Trump talk about the stock market and and everything is linked to the war with Iran. And everything has to do with the stock market. It's all a business, right? And everything he says, he's strategic about when the stock market is going up and when it's going down, and they can control the market. And that is how they make huge dividends, right? So it's not about us. It's not about us. It's not about our agenda. It's about the financiers and their oligarchs' agenda. And that is what we have to understand. Fauzi said it is as much about destabilizing BRICS oil sources as it is about revenge on Iran. Okay, my question, Fauzi. Iran knows that the United States is a snake. Iran knows that the United States has always offered peace. Every day they're having peace and 60 days of peace, while sometimes it's striking. What revenge are they having on Iran? And why is Iran even thinking of negotiating at this time? You know, let us say that you had an enemy and the enemy, told you that we could negotiate. Once is okay, then twice you'll forgive him, maybe the third time. But how many times are we hearing now about this peace and then the back and forth and whatever? It doesn't seem real. It doesn't seem real. It doesn't seem like this is just about Iran, right? There are deeper issues at play, and this is what we need to unmask, and we need to think, and we need to connect the dots, because it's just bigger than Iran. Pedro is saying here, Maduro thought he had allies. That's also, we don't, in the world of politics, you have allies if they have interests, right? You do not have allies if you cannot give them the whatever interest that they want. And I would say to even in our personal friendships, you have friendships if you have material stuff. If you don't have material stuff, your personal friends will also betray you. That is human behavior. Pedro Jamat is saying, you start thinking about negotiations. A deal has been announced since yesterday, but what's the deal? What is the deal? And that we have been hearing about the deal, and that's what we want to ask. What is the deal? Right? Every day they're having deal, and what is the deal? And then afterwards, the deal is settled, and tomorrow then there's another war, and that is what we're saying. That does not make any sense. Right, WHZ is saying the tit for tat. Every strike on Iran responds by what we're saying now, hitting a Middle East ally of US, right? And then they go back. But what I'm saying, WHZ, and all of you on the platform, is that you would expect Iran to do that and to continue to do that. But to have Iran pause, notice when Trump wakes up tomorrow and says, stop Iran, Iran stops. because we're going to go into a deal. Iran stops. And then Trump, even though Trump says stop, then he goes and strike Iran. Then Iran begins to retaliate. Then he says stop. We have to go into a deal. They go into a deal. Then they say we have how many days. Then those days end and they strike again. And it is just, it's like we're watching a movie. But it's a chaotic movie. At least when we're watching a movie, we see where the plot is taking us to, right? We can understand after a while. But in this plot here, we don't know what's going on, right? We don't know. I don't know if you are understanding. I don't. I don't. Maduro did have allies, hence why his wife was, I'm seeing the word here, was airlifted to allies. Who were the allies? That's the question. Who were the allies? And why was it? Didn't Maduro meet with the Russian or the Chinese shortly before he was actually captured, before he was kidnapped? I think he met with them the same day and then he was captured. So you make that make sense. His allies, were his allies involved in the betrayal? I don't know. Because he met with them, either the Chinese or the Russians, shortly, the same day he was kidnapped. Well, at least in the day, and then in the early morning of Saturday, they took him out, right? But Friday, I think in the afternoon, he had met with the with Russians or the Chinese. I can't remember the information, which country he met with. Iran will not have the nuclear dust. Remember, they first said no negotiations were being made at first, right? So why are they continuing these negotiations? Just tell us that they're not negotiating and begin to strike and destroy U.S. whatever they need to destroy. Out of the deal, right? Out of a deal. I don't know what the deal is, and that's what we want to learn. What is the deal? Connected to stock market and oil prices. Absolutely, that's the deal. That's the deal. But they will never tell us specifically what the deal is, which is connected to the stock market and the oil prices. And, so that is the whole thing. And are the Iranian leaders benefiting from the stock market and the oil prices, right? While the people in Iran have to be the ones who have to suffer, okay? Because they're being struck and their economy is being ravaged. And Americans also are being affected by the war efforts there in the Middle East. I wonder how much of Trump's speech is stock market manipulation. It is, and that's what we're saying here. WHZ and everybody is saying, Marie, that it is related to the stock market. It's definitely the stock market. All wars are related to the stock market and the banksters and how much money that they're earning, they're putting into their pockets. World War I, World War II, the Cold War, all of them are about money, banksters, and how much they will gain on the stock market. And then we have here Marie saying Russia and China had advised Maduro to strike first, but he refused to take their advice. Yes. Oh, it's okay. Would they have helped him had he struck? Because that would be an interesting thing if he had struck. U.S. was Maduro's pals. To your question, why Iran? Because U.S. foreign affairs strategy is a generational game of risk. So they are finishing what they started in the 1953 CIA coup. You're correct. You're correct. This has been an ongoing war, as Fongzi is saying, from 1953, right? And it is not only Iran, the entire Middle East, the United States wants to capture. But it knows that Iran, as Fongzi is suggesting, is a tall order, the challenge to be able to capture the entire, Middle East. So that is what they're doing now, and I don't know what's going to happen, but it's not looking pretty. WHZ saying, connected to control of African resources, Iran is in the Sahel. Okay, so that's why they're going after him, because they want to weaken Iran or take over Iran so that the Sahel nations would be impacted. I got you. Marie Antoinette is saying they probably would have helped him with the preemptive strike. We hope, because what we're seeing now is just a lot of betrayal that we don't even know what is happening. Iran and Russia are in the Sahel and in Africa on the whole. Yes, we know that Russia supports the Sahel country. I did not know that Iran helps them too. The global south should be glad oil is hard enough, is hard to get rather, since they're pushing for net zero, right? But are they really pushing for net zero, or are they just trying to control? I think the net zero sort of ambition is just trying to control the world, right? It does have nothing to do with net zero, because net zero doesn't make any sense. China too in Africa. Yes, China is also in Africa and benefiting from their resources. George W. Bush named the axis of evil was Iran, correct? Iraq, North Korea, correct? Was about what countries that they were on the target for, and Syria and all these countries for Western central banks. Just Google who is the central bank of Iraq, for example. And remember now that the Project for the New American Century, that was was the think tank and the agenda that was set for the Middle East. And back in 2003, 2004, I thought that Iran was next based on the listing of the countries there in the Project for the New American Century, but that did not happen. Okay, so that is interesting. Yeah, that's interesting. USA building a military base in Israel. I think that they're building a military base all over. In fact, in Jamaica, when the Nimitz actually went there and was on its way back to wherever it was going, when it was leaving Jamaica, the Jamaica Defense Force, suddenly caught on fire. So it's being rumored, it's being alleged that the United States could be building a military base right there on the JDF ground in Kingston, Jamaica. So I think even in Trinidad, remember in Tobago, they were also rumoring that. So I think that in most of our Caribbean territories, the United States is currently building military bases. Okay, if they have not yet built them up already. So that is an interesting sort of phenomenon, right, that we're seeing here for this discussion. Yeah. Now, make sure you're liking the live, and maybe this is now time for us to go home and, we're home already, but to get some sleep and rest, rather than, as I'm saying, we need sometimes to rest ourselves from these negative geopolitical wranglings and conflicts and, confusion, right? Any questions, any other questions, or now please share the live for tomorrow. We're going to be looking at the whole rise of Christian nationalism in the United States, because this is going to help us to understand where we're going in the U.S. Because the U.S. is moving in another direction, a direction that I would not say that it has never been in before, but I think that they have the tools, the technology, even the AI that they're telling us about, that is going to pose serious threats to our liberties and even to our lives. And this is the rise of the Christian nationalism that is permeating everywhere in the United States. It is false and it is dangerous. It is dangerous, and we need to look at some of the roots, and we need to see what is happening and how the U.S. is moving from a secular nation into what we're going to call a religious political nation state that is going to wreak a lot of damage to many nation states. And exactly what it's doing in Iran, in Venezuela, in Cuba. Manifest Destiny is also a Christian nationalist document. Even so, from way back when, Manifest Destiny was suggesting that God gave the United States the right to control the world. That is what they're suggesting. So we need to look at that, and we need to share. So share the link with many of your family members even tonight before the live, so that we can have lots of people tomorrow on the live. It begins at 7 tomorrow. Please be there. The USA already has military bases in the region. Nothing new. Right, correct. But they're also upgrading them. So even though they might have, some of them were, outdated and with whatever. So now they are modernizing them, if you will, and, updating them for modern warfare. Africa Lion 2026 is the name of the U.S. African War Games at present. Isn't this a movie? Isn't it African Lion 26? Is it a movie too? Is the movie the African War Lion? Where was I reading about that? You better be aware of the Arabs taking over the West. How are they taking over the West? Tell me how they're taking over the West. Even the Caribbean. How are the Arabs taking over the West? Share that. Where's your evidence? Can you debunk the fact that when you have the discussion that America is not and was not founded as a Christian country, please, because people don't read history. Right. It was, it's a debate, Michelle, and it's one that is very complex. I would like you guys to go and read the book if you can. I forgot the name. If somebody can find the name of the author, Rulers of Evil. Rulers of Evil. This is a very eye-opening book in terms of suggesting that a lot of how we thought the United States was founded on democratic rights and all of that is not necessarily true. So the fact is that the U.S. is saying that it's a secular state, right? Yet it practiced slavery, and slavery came from the church, from the Catholic Church, right? It was a child of the Catholic Church, and the United States adopted it. And then the United States started to use also the religious, justification from the Bible that slavery was really meant. So was that a secular state? I mean, these are some of the hard questions we need to ask in our discussion tomorrow night. Was the United States, as many people suggest, founded on secularism as a secular state with the church and the state separate, or should be separate, or is that a confusion? Or because the thing about it, and we will deal with that tomorrow, before the United States of America, there was never a country in the history of the world that was not built on religion and based on religion. Even what you call atheistic, because people think that atheism is not believing a deity, but you'll be surprised. But we will talk more about that tomorrow, right? CBS did a segment on African Lion, right, 2026. I think you were telling me that last night, Pomsey. And Pedro Jamata is saying a base is even in Cuba. Well, it's in Guantanamo Bay, because the United States own that area. Right, Rulers of Evil. Right, Rulers of Evil is what I would like you to. I think it's by by Tupper Saucy. Right. Please read a couple of chapters from that book, and maybe we can get into more chapters 1 and 2 of the book, and it will give us a sort of, background. Because the U.S. nationalism, this sort of Christian nationalism, is not just coming overnight, It has been around for some time, but it has grown in intensity during the Trump administration, we must say. The colonies that became were Christian in nature with how their constitutions were structured, absolutely. And while the National Federation Project was secular, correct. But and you're correct. But the whole matter of the slavery was both states and and a federal thing too. That became states. The United States is a complex nation to understand, really. Right? I think sometimes we just look at it in terms of black and white, and we say that this is what it was made and for and not. But it's much more texture than what we were thinking. All races practice slavery. Move on and stop trying to apply, blame, and deal with present oppressive laws. What are you talking about? We can't move on. You don't move on like that, because what we're suggesting is that history repeats itself. History rhymes. So we're not trying to just move on. What we're saying is that lots of what we had in history is returning, and we're trying to see what are at the roots of the things. Things don't just come overnight. As I'm saying, the matter of Christian nationalism did not just come overnight. It just didn't appear. It has its roots way in history, and we're trying now to see if we can look at the seeds that were planted and trace them to our current situation. So don't just think we can just move on. That's complex thinking, critical thinking, and that's what we demand, not just to forget what happened yesterday. The US Revolution evolved from a British association to declaration to confederacy to federation, but each state had its own history depending on who settled the colonies. Example, Louisiana was Catholic. Yeah, that is, and Louisiana was Catholic. Remember, it came after the Civil War, not the Civil War. Yes, after the Civil, not before the Civil War, after the Haitian Revolution. I beg your pardon. That was when that purchase was made. The USA was founded on secular law intentionally. The founders had religious beliefs that were very clear to institute secular laws and framework against the British Empire where the monarch was. Right, but they went ahead and still practiced slavery. That's what we're saying, and slavery was entrenched in a religious sort of understanding, and they had to use the Bible. So the very fact that they're using the Bible to justify slavery mean that they were not necessarily holistically secular, right? But yes, the Constitution seemed to have been a secular document, but the United States is a very contradictory state. Right? It says it's a free nation, yet it practiced slavery. It says that it's a secular nation, yet it practiced slavery, which was rooted in Catholic, canon law. Right? The colonies were the colonies, but when America declared independence, it was founded on secular law and the separation of church and state. Yes, that's what we would like to believe. But remember now that it's after it. One of the ironies also of the United States is that before what do you call it now? What's the in 1789, when the Constitution was ratified, right before the ratification of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence and these other laws there, the Bill of Rights in 1791, the United States did not have slavery was not as entrenched in the United States as after its Declaration of Independence and ratification of the Constitution, and that's very, very ironic that the United States would have strengthened slavery after the ratification of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. So the same countries that they were warring against and saying that they were just as a church state sort of nation states, the United States end up doing the same thing. And their slavery was horrible. The United States slavery was horrible. So the United States is a country that is really, we have to study in depth because it's rooted in a lot of contradictions. So sad, but it's true. But yes, in principle, the United States Constitution believes in the separation of church and state. Whether that was practiced, that's something that we have to question. Who to blame? Whitey? Well, we're not here blaming, we're blaming a system, here. Stephen Knight is saying there's nothing Christian about this country, right? And when they say God bless America, you got to ask, remember now that they're not thinking about the God of the Bible, they're just using God as a means of scaring people to control them. But they're not using Christianity in the way that you and I think that Christianity should be used in. And that's what we're going to study tomorrow. So that is the crux of the matter, is that it's a false Christianity. It's not even none at all, because they don't believe in Christianity for the most part. Example, there were 19 presidential administrations prior to George Washington. Yes. Before he became the actual president of the United States, as a federal president. U.S. jurisprudence was based on natural law, which is Catholic doctrine too, to some degree, because the Catholic Church does not believe in natural rights of individuals. Right? The Catholic Church does not believe in the natural rights of individuals. They believe that the Catholic Church believes in the canon law. Right? They believe their whole system is based on canon law, and the canon law system is based on what the Catholic Church says, the rights that the Catholic Church actually gives to you. The natural law is suggesting that rights are not given by governments or institutions. They are given to us by God, right? And that is what the founding fathers said. And that was natural law, not canon law. It was the middle ground between Catholics and Protestants. And I would agree to some extent with what you're saying there. I ain't forgot, however, everyone in those days practiced slavery Only the black race cries over slavery today, and none experience those laws of the time. Now, we're not here crying over, you're saying the blacks are, we're not here doing that. We're just trying to suggest that, the only reason I brought up slavery was to tell you that, slavery was a religious institution as a secular institution, but so the United States suggesting that it was a country which was separated religion from the state is not necessarily true. That's the only reason we brought up slavery, not to say that to make any sort of excuse. Look at some, Steve Knight is saying, look at some of the court cases today, a bunch of liars and thieves. Yeah, they're not Christians. They are not Christians. It's a false Christianity. Remember now that the Jews who said, and we need to make that point very well, the Jews who said that they were God's chosen people, they were the ones who were at the heart of having the Roman Empire crucify and murder the same Savior that they claimed they were waiting for. Right? They were waiting for the Savior for centuries. And the Savior arrived, and they had him crucified. We have to understand that this is what we're moving to. That these people who are calling upon God and praying and whatever are the same people who, if God should appear to them, they would kill him, or they would attempt to kill him. Okay? Always remember that. So this is not rooted in truth and honesty and integrity. U.S. Supremacy Clause is tethered to doctrine of discovery in international law per past Supreme Court precedent decisions. That is 15th century Reconquista papal bulls. And that is what some of what the evil rules of evil are suggesting, that the state was not necessarily entirely Protestant, that the United States, as Fonksy is saying, has some sort of Catholic roots. They don't like to hear that because everybody thinks that the United States is just 100% Protestant, but it was never found as 100% Protestant. And that is what rulers of evil actually, unmasks. Try and read that book. It's very, very packed with a lot of good information. Pedro Jamont is saying, should be furious, rather, the state that sold slaves asking for reparations. Why are you always on that reparation thing, Pedro Jamont? We're not talking about reparations right now. They never wanted to get rid of it. What happened afterwards? We had Jim Crow, right, and all those other oppressive laws against us. And remember now that after Jim Crow and then the 60s of the civil rights, what happened after civil rights? They started to put black men in prisons, right? Which is another segregation, another Jim Crow. I think we have not yet had that discussion on that. What after the 1960s and with the laws that they started now to implement against black people, which are resulting in many black men being in prison, right? Is that another iteration of the segregation laws, of the Jim Crow laws? Many people have not yet understood that. We don't talk about these difficult things, but the U.S. is not free, as many people think. The U.S. is not a free country as many. In fact, if many people know what the country is about, you run away from it because it's not that you should be scared about it. Don't get me wrong, but it's dangerous. Example, British claim of discovery on Virginia colony, that is 1606 royal charters by King James I. Correct. Michelle is saying here, very good. Even poor whites who did not hold land were not included in having the full rights of citizenship. And yes, black people were considered property or chattel, hence chattel slavery. There is a lot of contradiction. Absolutely. There's a lot of contradiction there. There's a lot of contradiction there. And the civil rights that they gave to black people and afterwards putting them in prison or men in prison, lots of contradictions that we have to unpack. Did African Americans really get civil rights? To an extent, we can say yes, but we can also say that those civil rights were also translated. They went backward with it and then sent many black men, created laws that would have many black men be sent to prison, right? Which affected the black family, and the black family has not been able to come back to being the center and the sort of influence that they had on U.S. society. When you think of the likes of Malcolm X and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and all these great men, black men were the center of what do you call it now, of freedom in the American society. They were the symbols because they were the ones. Something about the black presence. Give us our credit, and I'm not trying now to be, favoritism, but when it comes on to oratory, and particularly those strong African American men, they really stand up, and they will enamor you. They will, they can talk, right? And they know what they're talking about. But now something has happened to us. I don't know what has really happened to us, but we were falling short. Before Christ, what were Christians called? They were the Jews, right? They were the Jews. They were God's chosen people. And you have natural law tradition is Catholic dogma. But I'm saying that so how would you distinguish Fonzie between natural law and the canon law? How do you distinguish between those? And tomorrow we need to look at natural law. Can we, for homework tonight, can we find out the difference between natural law and Catholic canon law? We need to know that because there is some difference. There are some nuances there. WHZ saying chattel slavery was quite different from Arab and Slavic slavery. That's what it's totally different in the sense of that chattel meant that you are just an object. You are not even a human. So the European slavery was the worst form of slavery from that perspective. Fongzi is saying NL is a central doctrinally affirmed moral teaching in Catholicism, not strict. I would have to check that out, but and I'm not saying that you're wrong here. I think that there is some sort of nuance where we are concerned. But as far as the context in which the founding fathers of the United States had used the natural law, they were saying rights do not come from governments. They are saying that it came from the Creator. So you cannot, the Catholic Church says that who is right or who is supposed to have rights and who's supposed not to have rights. And that is what is set in law. In the United States, it's suggesting that all men are created equally, and no other society in the history of of Earth as we know it had that sort of constitution. It's grounded, in the magisterium of the Church, which has long taught that the natural law is a divine gift, right? That is how divine gift accessible through human reason. That is the nuance now, Fongzi. That is not what the impression that the founding fathers gave, or the natural law concept that came from Britain, because the whole natural law thing also came from Britain. I forgot his name, who spoke about the natural law, and that is where the founding fathers took it from him. So it's not given through human reason, because that's the whole purpose of the difference between the Catholic Church and the Protestant Church. Their thing is that human reason cannot be used to study the Bible. Right? Developed systematically by St. Thomas Aquinas, Summa Theologiae. Very nice. I love what you're saying here. Prison was another way to enslave, right, and to take away our civil liberties, the liberties that they claimed that they had given to us. They took it away from us by imprisoning us, right? Read that Constitution very carefully. Slavery hasn't ended once you are incarcerated, correct? It's a new form of enslavement, actually, right? It's a new form of enslavement. It is frightening. And I read quite a number of books about the American carceral reality, and it's not a pretty, reality, to put it mildly. The 14th Amendment has a Michelle is saying, has a loophole where you can be enslaved legally if you are convicted of a crime and become a prisoner. Right. And that is why they used it against Black people. Right. You're correct. Then we have Pedro Jamati saying, all created equal, but some are more equal than some. Right. Right. And you're right. And that is a whole thing with human behavior. Nobody will ever be fully equal before the law. None. Right? Because that is the nature of human beings, that we are prejudiced. right? And if it's not your family, is your friend, is your co-worker, right? You're going to have some favoritism over the persons that you think you know, or the persons that you connect with, right? We do exhibit some form of prejudice on discrimination in one way or another. Black people's progress can't continue to stand on the shoulders of a few black men. I agree 100% with you, WHZ. The like MLK or Farrakhan, we need to widen our base of support. And you are 100% correct. And I think that maybe the 60s had that, but I think that throughout history, you've always had strong black men who stood up for what the family. The family is what we need to reinstitute, and what the post-Civil War of the 1960s destroyed the black family, right? The black female have been destroyed, and the black man has been destroyed. It's very difficult for black males and black women to have healthy relationships, healthy communication. We don't understand each other. Sometimes we might all want to understand each other, and that is how it is built on. We're also in competition. They have made us to be in competition with each other, and we should not be in competition with each other. We should what? Complement, right? We are meant to complement and not to be in competition with each other. And that is the problem. Who is more educated, who has more money, who speaks better, all of these things we use as a form of, degrading each other. First sovereign to recognize U.S. sovereignty was Kingdom of Morocco in Treaty of Peace, is it Peace and Friendship, 1786, Common Era, longest lasting U.S. treaty. Yes, I remember that. And then we have natural law, John Locke. Yes, John Locke is the person I'm trying to remember. Thomas Hobbes, Adam Smith, Montesquieu. I was remember John Locke is the primary person that I'm trying to lean on, and Jean-Jacques Rousseau. I prefer John Locke though. I think he was British, and he wrote about the natural law that all men are created equal and natural, and we gain our rights from the God of nature and not from a government. Can you please explain is it HW again? What is HW? Could you explain what is HW? Yeah, I don't know what HW is. Could you tell me what it is? Yes. So that is what we are going to discuss tomorrow. We don't want to get into that topic now, right? But there is a subtle rise of homework. Yes, the homework is to read the book Rulers of Evil. Rulers of Evil by, what's his name again? I think you can get that book online, their PDF version. Is it Tulsi? By Tulsi, I think. And chapters 1 and 2. Just read chapters 1 and 2. Chapters 1 and 2. There's a lot to unpack, right? There's a lot to unpack from that book. I got that is the homework, right? So the homework is to read The Rulers of Evil by Tulsi. Can't remember his first name. Locke was life, liberty, property, and Jefferson dumbed it down with happiness. Life, liberty, and happiness. Nothing's wrong with that, by the way, because we need that too, right? It's for our state to be happy and well. All right. So tomorrow we're going to be looking at that very important topic. Send out the notification now to people, to your friends, to your colleagues, because the rise of Christian nationalism is something that is a dangerous precedent and a dangerous path that the United States is moving on, and it's going to cause a lot of problems. And it's going to cause the re-enslavement of a lot of us. I don't think we're going to have racialized slavery anymore. I think we're going to have slavery by any nation or kindred or tongue. If you don't, just like the pandemic, if you don't want to obey what the government tells you, then you are going to receive the ants of the ruling elites. Yes, thank you, Marie. That is by Rulers of Evil by Topper Saucy. This is the author of the book. You can research it in and Google it, and you'll see PDF, and you can read chapters 1 and 2. Right? We have to get our understanding. Republic was about property rights of land owning gentry right. It wasn't about the entire masses. And that's what I said, Fancy, that it was the slaves after the Civil War that sort of expanded liberties, not only for themselves, but for every man, including the white man. So when we think that white people gave black people freedom, that's not true. It's the other way around. If you read the history carefully, you'll see that it is a black man and a woman that actually fought for freedom for everybody in the United States, whether you're white, you're Latino, you're Asian, whatever you came from. Read the Black the W.E. Du Bois, read the Black Reconstruction, and you are going to see where he details that so well, right? So we are wonderful people, and if we could just get back to basics and be more focused, I think that we would be able to stand up against all the injustices that are happening in the United States. Remember now that it's black people who have always stood up against injustices in the United States of America. For the most part, others didn't. All right? We are the ones, I don't know for what reason, if destiny has given us that sort of, very heavy weight to carry, heavy burden to carry, but we are the ones who have always stood up. But somehow we have been captured now. We are so acting like white people. We're doing everything that they do, and we are confused as they're confused. And as a result of that, the state is suffering. The 14th Amendment was about downgrading the European gentry's political status, hence why birthright citizenship on chopping block. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. I think it's now time for us to call it a night. And remember, please join me tomorrow at what time? At 7 p.m., where we are going to have the rise of Christian nationalism. Please go on the channel and send that link to everybody that you know, your classmates, your colleagues, so that we can have an enlightening and intelligent discussion for tomorrow. Ciao. Thank you so much for joining.